I'll call the June 30th Study Commission meeting to order, please. Can we have roll call?
Mary McCormick, Cindy Shaw,
She's excused.
Chad Silk, Dan Dennehy, Raylyn Brandel,
Here.
Matt Steppen, Ben Thielen,
Excused.
and Cindy Perdue-Lolan, and Lori Casey.
Here. We have the Pledge of Allegiance and prayer. Okay. Public comment on any item on the agenda.
Operator Banner of 2601 Grand Avenue. First, I have a question of procedure. I have basically two comments, one personal and one on behalf of the Greeley. It's going to run over your 3-minute limit. Is that acceptable?
Is it 6 minutes total? One for each?
It's about 4.5.
Okay, that's perfect.
Okay, thank you. Reference item 7A, Butte-Silver Bowl Council of Commissioners. Subject, Butte-Silver Bowl Charter Section 3.03E. Powers and duties of the Council of Commissioners. I must respectfully disagree with Commissioner Fisher. And I believe that most of the citizens of the greater Butte-Silver Bowl community also disagree with him. The duties of the commissioner are much more than just determining policy. Maybe instead of the commissioners educating the public, the people should be educating the commissioners. In the eyes of the people, the elected commissioner is the representative of the people. The people expect the commissioner to act like their representative at all times and all things relative to the local government. No, the commissioner should not be able to give orders directly to the Butte-Silver Bowl employees. Just as the Butte-Silver Bowl employees should not be able to give non-ordinance enforcing orders directly to the constituents of a commissioner without going through that commissioner. And that is the problem. Because there is no systematic channel defined in the Butte-Silver Bowl Charter for this procedure process. And as you witnessed last week, there is no clarity as to who is responsible for what and when. The commissioner's duties and responsibilities stipulated in the Butte-Silver Bowl Charter should include coordinating neighborhood improvement in all of the neighborhoods in his or her district. This, of course, would require that we have full-time commissioners making a living wage. So now that we are back to the question raised last week. For and on behalf of the Greeley Neighborhood Community Development Corporation, Inc. 13 years and another week, and we are still waiting for a reply as to whether or not duties as stipulated in Section 3.03 are mandatory or obligatory. We would think you would also be interested in the official position of our local government on this issue. Google says, yes, in many contexts, duties are mandatory, meaning that they are required or obligatory. Duties are often associated with legal or moral obligations, and failure to fulfill a duty can have consequences. The last Butte-Silver Bow City County Attorney interpreted duties as optional. We would like to know what this current Butte-Silver Bow City County Attorney interpretation is. To say duties are not mandatory seems to be just a little bit stupid. You might want to ask these commissioners tonight what their interpretation is relative to the term duties in the Butte-Silver Bow Charter. If they believe duties can be interpreted as optional, then we would again suggest that this commission consider separating duties from powers and inserting the word mandatory in front of the duties section of the Butte-Silver Bow Charter. So there is no chance for misinterpretation of what the meaning of the term duties. Respectfully submitted for your consideration and action.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderrob. Any other further comment?
That's two.
That's
I
two?
got one
That's it?
for the next one.
Okay. Any other public comment on any item on the agenda? How about public comment on anything not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the study commission?
Thank you. Orator Vanderrob, 2601 Grand Avenue. The subject, terminology. I know what you're thinking. What more does that pain in the posterior, Mr. Vanderrob, have to say it now? Well, I would like to commend you that after a citizen brought it to your attention and the city county attorney certified that this is not a city government, but this is a city county government, you all have made an honest effort to use the terminology city county manager. But many of your city slicker commissioners that came before you last week kept using the term city manager and mayor. These are city government terms. Yes, some counties do use the term mayor, but as you saw last week, the connotation of mayor is baby kissing ribbon cutter. The terminology you use for intent and attitude purposes is important. Thus, may I request that if you are going to refer to an administrative manager, that you continue to use, as you have been, the terminology of city, county manager. That if you are going to refer to a city county council of commissioners chair, that you use the terminology city county council of commissioners chair, a go-to person for the people. Respectfully submitted for your consideration and action. Thank you.
Any other public comment on anything not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the study commission? Okay, moving on. If we can have approval of the minutes of the meeting held June 16th, 2025. I know these were lengthy. Ms. McCormick?
I move to approve the minutes of June 16, 2025.
Is there a second? Second. Okay, Mr. Dennehy seconds. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you for approving those minutes. All right, so our conversations with departments tonight are from our Council of Commissioners. And so commissioners, last week I just asked you to organize internally who would come up to the mic and take their turn. So if you wouldn't mind, please just organizing that way. And then we did want to make sure that we stay focused on the charter and the duties in the charter, but we do want to hear about the issues in your particular districts. So please feel free to share with us any information you feel pertinent there. And you do have the questions, so we'll just kind of go round robin and ask those in order of every one of you. So whoever would like to go first, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's my understanding the microphone is on, so I think we should be good. Ms. Brandel, members of the Study Commission, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to come before you tonight. I know these are long and daunting meetings that you all go through, but I think it's a good way to get some representation from the council. My name is John Morgan. I'm the chair of the Council of Commissioners at 2630 Meadowbrook Lane here in Butte, and I also represent District Number 1 on the City Council.
Excellent, thank you. Ms. Casey, can you start us off?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Morgan, for coming tonight. The first question we have is, what unique duties, responsibilities, or challenges do you face serving the citizens of your district?
Sure. So what I did to prepare for this is I just kind of went through and wrote some notes on, and I'm sure you guys will have some follow-up questions as we go through, so please let me know. The first one would have to do with staff availability during the evenings. As some of you know that have been associated with Butte-Silver Bow, you know that in a part-time capacity, many of the commissioners have full-time jobs, and so they're usually spending nights and weekends or throughout the day if their employer allows it to just catch up on what's going on with the city, reviewing agendas and such. And a lot of times you have follow-up questions in regards to something that you're going to be voting on, or you just have questions overall what's going on with the city council, city county council. And so it's nice to be able to reach out to a staff member. Usually it's a department head that you're reaching out to, just to ask a follow-up question, and sometimes it's difficult to get them after hours. Some answer, some don't, which I completely understand, but it does, cause a hindrance in being a commissioner for that. Another topic that I wrote down was, do we cross districts or do we represent just our own? We all have a district that we are elected for. I'm District Number 1. And then, as you know, we have 11 other districts that people represent. And it seems like the only time you're dealing with truly just District Number 1 is during the election cycle. Other than that, the city of Butte, when something comes up and they have something that they want to discuss with a commissioner, they reach out to the person that they know. And that might be District 9 reaches out to me. Somebody from my district might reach out to District 3. It just depends on who's going to answer that call. 9 times out of 10, what happens when they call me from another district, I ask them to get their commissioner involved so that they're aware of what is going on in their district. And a lot of that comes from they might know what's going on in their district more so than me knowing what's going on in the entire city. And so I always like to refer people to that. There are times where their commissioner might be unresponsive or just they can't get a hold of them, and then at that point, obviously, we're there to solve problems. So then I'll help them, work through a solution if I can. Another thing, as defined in the charter, it says being the chair is often considered that I'm in charge of the council, i.e., the main supervisor. And really, the charter doesn't define that I'm like the manager of the council, other than I manage the agenda that the council sets forth. And so the challenge is if somebody has an issue with a commissioner, for whatever reason, they come to me looking that I'm the one that needs to fix the problem. When in reality, if you were to, sanction a commissioner, that is a process in itself. It's not like I can wave a wand and put down a punishment. And so, as far as charter definition, if you could maybe define that a little bit more, what the proper technique would be or the proper procedure would be for an issue with a commissioner. We do have the political on practice, is that the right term for it, at the state level? Commissioner on political practices. I mean, obviously, if something is warranted to go to that level, you could always reach out to them. Usually it's, they're not responding to my phone call, they haven't answered my email. So it's usually something pretty minor, but just having, maybe that step in authority would be handy. Next I have communication. Commissioners aren't always the easiest to get a hold of, and sometimes a quick question or comment could alleviate issues before it goes so big on the council floor. Oftentimes, Butte's rumor mill kicks on pretty early, right? And by the time you get the phone call at 9 o'clock at night, that problem has snowballed way bigger than it needed to be. And it's the simple fact that they might try to call me, and then if they don't get me, they might go to the assistant chair, the vice chair, and then they talk to another commissioner, and then that commissioner moves it forward. And by the time we get our whole hands wrapped around it, the issue is so big that it just gets too big to handle at that point. And so communication is difficult. There's so many ways to communicate too, that you have email, you have a phone number that you can call. When I first started as a commissioner, we used our private emails, and so you didn't even know what the naming convention of what the email was before. Now at least you have an idea of what a commissioner's email could be. Mine, I've been going through a recent change since leaving council, coming back to council, being an employee at Butte-Silver Bow, leaving Butte-Silver Bow, coming back as council. I mean, I've gone from jmorgan at bsb.mt.gov. I've gone to jpmorgan at bsb.mt.gov. Now I'm currently at jomorgan at bsb.mt.gov. And it seems like when people say they can't get a hold of me and they forward all these emails to me, they've tried every email that they've had. And so there is that, breakdown in communication as well. And then one of the other challenges, unique duties type of thing, is the us versus them mentality. It seems like, the council, regardless of administration, of what's going on, it feels like it's always the council versus them rather than us working as a team kind of thing. And I understand with the team mentality, you have to be able to, have disagreements, which we all do. And it's healthy in local government to have that, because you don't want to just approve things that, just because. But I think the mentality of us working as a part of a team, causes a problem, because it doesn't happen all the time. It does happen some, but not consistently. And so I think if you could just figure that out and remind the commissioners that even though they are an elected official and they do represent their constituents, they are still part of Butte-Silver Bow in some segment of the government. And so when we say, the council, Butte-Silver Bow does this, why would they do that kind of a thing? And it's like, well, that's a rule that we enacted because we're part of Butte-Silver Bow kind of a thing. So that's something to think of. Unique duties, just going off the cuff here, there's a lot of things, as Mr. Banderob mentioned, that, there's duties that are there, and we get through it on some questions down below. Time is difficult to find, right? I mean, there's a lot more things I'd like to do as a commissioner, but now having 2 kids, a full-time job, on the council, I mean, it really is you're juggling time. And some people say, well, then Morgan, get out. And it's like, maybe that's what I need to do. But to me, I'm still there for the community, and I'm there doing good things. And so it is a juggling act on, I don't feel like I should just get kicked out of the government just because I have other things going on, because everybody in this room has the same stuff in their life going on as well. You all could be doing something completely different than what you're doing right now, but you choose to represent this city. And I think if we have more people like that that are willing to do it, that's what we need, rather than just saying, you've got too much going on in your life, take a hike, kind of a thing. So, that's all I have.
Follow-up questions? Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, John, for coming. You're my commissioner now.
Yep.
Show up. So my question is about, you talked about the charter and defining the chair of the county commission. But do you think it'll be hard to do those kinds of specific definitions in the charter, especially with trying to define the chair's role over elected officials because of that autonomy? That's going to be kind of a tough task, I think. And the other reason is because we try and keep, as much as we can, the charter vague for a reason, so we're not stuck and painted into a corner. But I want your thoughts on how you rise above, and even if you can, with regard to the elected official piece of it, and then trying to put the chair over those elected officials.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Purdue-Dolan. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the question, right? As I said, people come to me thinking that I'm the supervisor, where in fact, the constituents are the supervisors, and that's who should be in the decision-making process if there is a problem with the commissioners. What I'm saying is maybe there's a way to define that the chair is not responsible, is not the supervisor, kind of a thing. Which again would be difficult to do. I mean, because where do you put that in? Do you put it in as an asterisk in the charter? I mean, that's the challenge. Or maybe it's just a communication thing that the chair could handle at the very first meeting of the Council of Commissioners as they get brought into it. That might be a function as well. I mean, that might kind of caveat it, but in the society that we all live, whenever you have a problem, you always want to go to someone. And if it's not defined who to go to, who are you going to go to? You're going to go to the person that has the title of chair. And so, I mean, it is a balancing act. I agree. It's not something that is easily corrected with the strike of a pen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Quick follow-up. So I'm thinking that maybe because we have to look at this in two ways. One, where the voters get to decide actual changes in the charter and the language is changed, and then we have to get that vote of the people. It might be something where this could be in our list of recommendations for the Council of Commissioners to come up with a sentence or two about how that, like you mentioned, how this is framed and how the council is run, and then just give folks that kind of educational piece with that, maybe a recommendation.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Purdue-Dolan. I mean, maybe it is a SOP for the Council of Commissioners to draft internally and have it as a document for review.
Further follow-ups? Okay, Ms. Dolan, can you take number 2, please?
I can, thank you. Thank you again, John. Number 2 is, do you feel that any of the duties and responsibilities assigned to commission members by Butte-Silver Bow's existing charter need to be revised or removed?
Thank you, Ms. Purdue-Dolan. As far as the broad question goes, no, I don't see anything that we need to change. I mean, we are the legislative branch of the government, and I think that's the biggest thing that we have to remember as we, join the Council of Commissioners. We have the 3 branches. We are there. There's oftentimes that people disagree with, either what we're doing or what we've done. A lot of people think that we can control staff, we can hire, we can fire, that kind of stuff. Again, as a miscommunication just based on, as a commissioner represents me kind of a thing. And so they expect us to to answer their call in the sense of, you know, firing maybe that staff member that they didn't particularly get along with or stuff like that. But as far as the duties and responsibilities, no, I don't think there's anything that would need to change.
Mr. Morgan, and in regards to section 3.03C, the authorization of community councils to advise the Council of Commissioners, do you see that, to Mr. Vanderob's question about it's a duty versus, an optional duty versus a mandatory duty, how do you feel about the community councils piece?
Thank you, Ms. Brandel. I'm trying to remember back to all the meetings that we held on this particular clause, which was quite a few years ago, Mr. Rip Vanderob. I remember remembered the discussion. We did have a legal interpretation at that time, to the point that we went through, from what I remember, kind of an English lesson of breaking down the sentence structure. County Attorney Joyce at the time went through that and broke down each clause, and I'm sure you can find the recording on that. Mr. Vanderob probably knows the date that it might have been discussed. So, you know, as far as that goes, you know, I like to refer to our legal department. They're the ones that have the law degree, and I stand behind what they say. You know, I remember some of the discussion that was there was, you know, the council doesn't need to authorize it. The council does need to authorize it. And so I would have to go back and rehash a lot of that stuff that we talked about at that point.
Any follow-up questions? Number 3, Mr. Steppen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Morgan. Double duty this week. You get 2 meetings. Thank you for that. Question number 3, could the Council of Commissioners be more effective and better meet the needs of our community by having fewer members that are compensated as full-time city-county officials?
Thank you, Mr. Steppen. This question really goes back to multiple years of thinking, because we've been tossing around this idea for quite some time. It's been a topic that's come before the council, officially, unofficially, for many years. And at the end of the day, I think it would be beneficial if it was laid out correctly. Meaning, I went through the budget before I came here and asked for some numbers, and it looks like right now's budget that we have for 11 commissioners is $103,763. And so that's the numbers that I seen on the budget book that I was looking at. You know, if they're off a little bit, you know, give me some leeway. But if I were to break that down into, you know, the number of commissioners, you could divide that by 11. And then the chair is at 12,569. So roughly you're looking at a budgetary impact of about $116,000 that you would have. And so depending on what you guys are going to recommend, if you were to move to full-time commissioners, what would that salary be? You're not going to get 3 full-time commissioners at $116,000. You would have to increase that budget, you know, that much in order to get that. And so then the question comes up, what does that particular salary look like? I haven't been involved in any salary studies for the other city, county governments out there of what their commissioners or city councils make. Right now, to my understanding, Butte-Silver Bow and Anaconda Deer Lodge are the only city-county consolidated governments. So that salary study might be a little bit more difficult to come up with, but I know we're a can-do city and we can figure that out pretty easy. But yes, I do think it would be beneficial at least to look at, and it would be beneficial for the community to look into it and make their decision if that's something that they would want to fund. I do think that it allows a commissioner to maybe dive into issues a little bit deeper than maybe what they are able to do. I will say that for as long as I've been on the commission, you have 12 commissioners, and everybody on the commission takes a different role as being a member of that city county. You have some that are fully dedicated, that dedicate a lot of time to it. You have some that might not dedicate as much time to it, or they just do what they have to do to represent their district. And so if you were to move it into a full-time salaried position, you know, like I said, they might be able to dive into the issue a little deeper. They would treat it more of a profession, that they have a job to be at from the hours of 8 to 5. A constituent, you know, should have the availability to get an answer from their commissioner, you know, a lot easier than maybe what they have today. You know, looking at cell phones, looking at emails and stuff like that. Let's see, easier to get a hold of, hard email. Cost would be something to consider. And then the number always seems to be something that is discussed. You know, some people that I've talked to say 3, some say 5, some say 8, some say 7. I mean, I don't know what that true answer is, but if you start adding in, you know, a professional salary and, you know, you have 8 of them, I don't know if your cost, your rate of return would be worthwhile. So I think it'd take some pretty good strategic understanding of what you're looking to do with that. The other thing that I think is important to mention is that we really are in a pretty good spot having the city-county consolidated government, in the sense of, you know, if we have, say, 3 full-time commissioners, I'm only using that as an example. You guys might think it's more, I might agree it's more, but it does allow for fewer numbers to represent more, but you also have the city-county consolidated part that a lot of other local municipalities don't have. When I was on the Montana League of Cities and Towns, there was an issue going on with some of the smaller communities that are still city-county, you know, divided. The city, where all the jobs are at, was seeing no or little to no growth. And so the tax revenue coming into the city was pretty much non-existent, or it hasn't changed. The county, on the other hand, has seen a significant amount of growth. And so their tax base was a lot higher. So they had money to spend on roads and upkeep and that type of stuff. But the problem that they were running into was the people from the rural areas were traveling into the towns, you know, using the city infrastructure, but not paying taxes on it. But the smaller group, the city, was having to fix those problems with their, you know, small to dwindling tax base. Here in Butte-Silver Bow, we're fortunate in the sense that everything comes into one pot. And then you can, as a past public works director, you can, you know, prioritize projects and fix them as you need to based on that. Obviously, you still have funding problems, but you know, it's a lot easier to have that whole site collected rather than just a small city.
Thank you. Follow-up questions? All right, Ms. McCormick?
Thank you, Chair Brindle. Welcome, Mr. Morgan. Thanks for being here tonight. Last week, when we had our first group of commissioners here, I asked about term limits, and that kind of went over like a lead balloon. And one of the things that, the few that I asked that seemed to come up was institutional knowledge, that it took a while to get some institutional knowledge. And you've alluded to in the last question that maybe having you know, full-time commissioners certainly seems to allow it, maybe would give people an opportunity to get up to snuff sooner. But in lieu of that, I'm wondering if, you know, waiting 8 to 12 years till a commissioner feels comfortable seems like a kind of a long time to me. And I was wondering if you had any suggestions for people contemplating running for council, what they could do to prepare themselves for the position, or any special training. I know that the counselor commissioners do that training with, or workshops with the local government, state, local government. But if you'd had any suggestions to make that an easier process, I would like to hear about that.
Sure. Thank you, Ms. McCormick. So yes, I would agree with my fellow commissioners that there is a pretty steep learning curve when assuming this position, just because, you know, there's so much going on, there's so much history that's happened in the past. And I would say that me coming back on council has been almost more difficult this time than it was before, and that's because a lot of the department heads since my last tenure has changed so significantly. I mean, you had a change in the county attorney, you had a change in the planning board or the planning department, you had other department heads that have kind of shuffled through, so you did lose that past knowledge of what was there. And I think, as far as term limits go, I'm not opposed to it in the sense of, it does prepare you for your departure date, right? As you sit today, I don't know what my departure date is. It's until somebody runs against me and wins the election, which is good, or it's what I did last time. I was burnt out at the time and needed to get off, because you start to, get a little jaded in the sense of, here I go for, my 13th year at the time, and it's time to represent maybe a different group or do something different. And so that's when I stepped down. It was refreshing. You still stayed in contact with Butte-Silver Bow, watched what happened, and then you come back and you have a new breath, if you will. The chair, as the rules of order, or I believe the charter, has that there is a term limit on chair, right? You can be 2 consecutive terms, which is a 4-year stint, and then you have to be off for a term before you can get back on it. I haven't seen a problem with that. I mean, I think it's good to get some new ideas, flowing into the council, and it gives other people opportunities, to move forward. I think the challenge with passing knowledge on, in the normal sense, is that a commissioner or the person that's sitting in the office, they don't plan on losing the election, right? And when they lose the election, there's usually hurt feelings, and at that point they go into, the lame duck stage, and then they just shut down, and that doesn't help really anybody. Whereas if my term is up at the end of December, you'd probably be more willing to help the next person understand what is going on. What projects have you been working on the past year, and maybe help keep moving that type of stuff forward. So term limits outside of Butte-Silver Bow, we're not here to discuss national stuff. I tend to think that it's something that could be utilized in other spots. Did I answer your question?
Mr. Silk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Morgan, for being here. One of the questions that I wish I would have asked last week is if the public voted on a reduction of the amount of commissioners, being a commissioner for as long as you have, how do you see that transition playing out on staggered terms, commissioners? I guess I really don't understand, if we have a change to the charter and we're supposed to help implement this change 90 days after an election, do you have any suggestions on how that transition would work? Or is it just as simple as the commissioners who, how do you think that would look? That's a very broad question, and maybe my fellow commissioners up here can help answer that, but I wish I would have asked that last week, because someone brought up last week of figuring out how much it would cost, and we were like, oh yeah, we gotta get on that. So I thank you for your your roughly $116,000 on what is already being spent, but I would like to hear your ideas on how that would work, if you have any yet.
Thank you, Mr. Silk. I wish I had a really definitive answer on that. I think a good starting point would be to see how they consolidated in 76 or 77, because you had the aldermen and then you had commissioners. I can't remember the exact terms of it. How did they work through that process? I mean, there's been discussions about how they came up with 12 commissioners. I heard the story that none of them were willing to give up their seats, so they just said, okay, well then if nobody will agree on that, we'll just make you all commissioners. Now, is that something that I think we should do again? Probably not. I mean, obviously, if you're going to go down that path, you're going to limit the number of them. But I think that would be a good starting point, to start with what we've done in the past and see how that could be perfected. I would imagine that at that point, you might have some commissioners that would be willing to just step aside and maybe let somebody else move forward. That's not, to say that they all will. Maybe you just develop a process to get elected, and everybody that's interested in running for it would run for it, but you'd have to be cognizant that you might have a complete flip of the council, and you might have a complete new council of commissioners or city county commissioners that would be out there representing everybody. Hence why our current form has a staggered approach on the election of commissioners, where half are 1 year and half is the other, kind of a thing. So yes, it would be a challenge.
Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So following up on Chad's question, I think it was mentioned last week, there are maybe two different options for having full-time commissioners. There was the thought of at-large for representing all of Butte-Silver Bow, and each commissioner represents the entire city county, versus enlarging the districts, if it were to go, let's just, for example, 5. And then those 5 would have larger districts, but still be a district, and that those folks in those constituents in that district would go to a certain commissioner. So there's two schools of thought. I would just like your opinion on which do you think might work better for Butte-Silver Bow, going from what we are now into something different.
Thank you, Ms. Purdue-Dolan. Again, I wouldn't have an issue with an at-large council. We kind of had that, we have that today. I mean, like I said, it seems like you work within your district only when it's election season, and then after that, you work with the city as a whole, to work through the issues. I mean, there's nothing that I'm aware of that's written down that says that I can't help somebody that's in District 3 or District 7. I mean, if somebody calls me and wants me to help them and they don't want the commissioner that's representing, there's nothing that would tell me to tell them, no, I can't help you. I guess the question that I would have on that is, I would assume if it covers the whole city would vote 5 times for a commissioner. And then the question is it the top 5 vote getters, or how, you could go through and come up with other scenarios, but I think those would just be defined, right?
So, Mr. Dennehy, that kind of started question number 4, if you want to go ahead and officially ask.
John, thank you for coming, and all the commissioners tonight. If the number of commissioners were to be reduced, what do you think would be important considerations to ensure fair representation among residents throughout the geographic boundaries of Butte-Silver Bow? You mentioned it a little bit, John, and do you have a number in mind in your experience as being on the Council of Commissioners, of appropriate number of council commissioners if the commission was reduced or not?
So on this particular one, I did write a couple of bullets on there. I have 3 of them. One was try to draw the boundaries fairly. If we're going to go to a smaller commission district, how would you draw the boundaries to make sure that everybody within the city county is represented fairly? I would be kind of cautious on how that would be done. So I think, maybe the at-large type of thing would help alleviate some of that. It's just, who would make that determination of, is Harrison the cutoff? Well, I don't know, I think we'll put that over here. I mean, there's just a lot of controversy that could come out of that. And, maybe you have somebody from outside draw the boundaries. That I don't know. I mean, you would have to make sure that you're doing that fairly. As we know, from a much higher level across governments, district boundaries are always something that is being discussed over and over, and how they change. And I think outlining how they get changed is necessary, so that people can't say that they're just trying to, get somebody else elected over somebody else. So I think that would be a consideration that somebody would have to make. They'd have to make sure that it doesn't just turn into a popularity contest. I mean, as you start limiting the number of commissioners, is it just going to be who the biggest property owner is in Butte that's going to get those seats? Or how do you make sure that it's a fair election going through, just like, they really are today? But it's something to be considered. And then my third point was maybe term limits could be imposed, so that, you would have a circle, a revolving door, as you will, for the commissioners, coming in. So, number, I think you asked number.
Yeah.
Of what I was thinking. This is something that I've, debated internally for quite some time. For some reason, I always thought of 3, and I think some of that was a budgetary impact. To me, if you start saying we need 5, we need 7, we need 8, that's just gonna, the public can't afford to have 8 full-time commissioners making, full-time benefits at $100K plus, So how do you fund it? I mean, I think you have to do a cost-benefit ratio on it and make sure that, that number is what the citizens of Butte can afford, rather than, you have wishes and wants kind of a thing. And maybe it's a phased-in approach. Maybe you start smaller with the opportunity of going bigger if it needs to, or you start bigger with the opportunity of going smaller. But for all my years, being in this realm, I always had 3 in mind, because you have an odd number for majority. But, then I've had people come at me before saying, well, then you only have to get 2 commissioners to vote. Well, it's just like today, you only have to get, 5 or 6 to be able to vote for it too. So, yeah. There's a lot smarter people out there than me that can figure this out, that's for sure.
Mr. Morgan, if I could follow up regarding at-large districts. One of the things that came up both from the MSU Law Center and then last week was that at-large districts tend to, I guess, drift towards those who vote, right? So if you, the example that was given in Bozeman, there's a very active voting constituency that seems to get all of the seats, but then those districts that don't vote, like some of our districts, we only turn out 100 to 150 people or something in that district, even though there's a lot of people in that area. So we would skew towards maybe more affluent neighborhoods or more voter registered neighborhoods. What do you think in terms of that representation? How would you slice that up, I guess?
I think the key would be to somehow educate people of what those positions are and what their powers would be if they were able to get into a commissioner seat. I think just running for office in general gets people scared and they decide not to run for office. And so, in my opinion, it seems like you see a lot of type A personalities that are ready to take charge, and they're the ones that are going to jump into to run for office, where the people that are, calm, collective, and, just don't like being the public, figure, they don't want to run for office. Whereas if you could, just educate people on, hey, here's the real impact you could do if you were to run for office, might help get more people to run for the office. The other thing I think, I keep saying I think because these questions are so broad that you can't really define a lot, and opinions in this matters, but these are all my opinions on what I've thought of, and so I keep thinking this, but there's a debate that would happen, that people need to come to the table and be open for ideas, and I think that's the key. And you know, I think the at-large thing, you know, a term limit might get rid of some of that issue, or you might get you know, Butte's notorious for having, you know, certain families run certain things. They might be there forever. So you'd have to work through that on the at-large side of things.
Thank you. Any other follow-ups? Mr. Silk, you're on for number 5.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, thank you, Commissioner Morgan. Number 5, many Butte-Silver Bow department directors and elected officials have suggested that government efficiency might be better served by an executive branch comprised of a hired city-county manager and an elected mayor. What are your thoughts as to a city-county manager-mayor compared to the current chief executive form?
Thank you, Mr. Silk. Again, this is something that's been discussed for probably as long as I've been a commissioner, about the pros and the cons for both forms of government, even though ours would have to be tweaked a little bit. You know, the city-county manager versus just the definition of city manager. There's definitely pros and cons to both sides. I mean, the last time I checked working with other municipalities in Montana, nobody out there is perfect. And so that is something that we would have to consider, what our end game is and what we really want as a city county. I do think that if you moved more towards a city county manager and elected mayor, you're gonna take some of that political pressure off of the mayor or the city council, because you're gonna have somebody in a role that can make the decision based on facts and what is best for the city county, rather than what is just based on allowing them to keep their job, you know, as an elected chief executive. I know that's not the fact, or not the fact for all the chief executives in the past, but you know, you would hope that the decisions that they make are not based on how do I get reelected in 2 years, kind of a thing. Whereas if you have that city county manager, there, I believe, would be appointed by the council, and so they could make their decisions based on the facts and not worry about the political pressure that they might get. Now, the commissioners would give them their own political pressure, you know, depending on how that relationship would go. We've seen that a few years ago in one of our neighboring cities. But then the commissioners also take the political pressure, you know, as well, because, boy, it's like we're living in a political system, right? But the answer is it might alleviate some, but it's going to cause more problems in other forms as well. So we have to make sure that it's going to accomplish what we want. It seems like the city county manager is kind of a buzzword. You know, the people that I've talked to about it think that it's just going to fix everything, and I think that's going to be challenging. I mean, it might fix some things, but there'll be other problems that we'll have to figure out in the long run too.
Excellent. Follow-up questions? Mr. Steppen?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, John, for that. This is kind of, I guess, a follow-up to that comment or that point of view, and something that I've been thinking about as we've had this city county manager discussion, is really the fundamental principle that of broad representation in government and limiting who can step forward and raise their hand, especially when we're talking about, you know, one entire branch of our government, and what the executive branch then looks like if it's not an elected official that's in charge of it, if that makes sense. And so I want to get your thoughts on that. Does my question make sense?
Kind of, sort of. Let me take a stab at that. I think the important part of having a city county manager, it would be the definition of what the qualifications of that position would be. I think you would have to make sure that the position is written in the sense of the person would have the appropriate background to hold that position. You know, right now it's, you know, as a chief executive or a council of commissioner member, it really is, you know, you're 18 years or older and you've lived within a district or you'll have lived within Butte-Silver Bow. I think in order to be effective in that role, you would have to have a true background in running a city or being part of a city that is being ran, you know. And so I think that would be the key to that. Does that kind of answer? Give me another one.
It does, and I apologize. I don't think I've formulated my question well. But maybe I'm looking at it this way. In a city county manager, somebody or some group then defines the description and what their qualifications are. Right now, the voters decide who's qualified to be our chief executive, right? And to me, that's a fundamental difference in government, right? Mm-hmm. Broad representation where the voters decide versus a group deciding who's qualified and limiting who can step forward and raise their hand for that role, if that makes sense.
So I believe that power, in the sense, would go to the Council of Commissioners at that point. The public would have to really understand who they're voting for when they get to those seats, knowing how they're going to either appoint a city county manager and make sure that they're the right people making that decision of who to hire. So they're going to shift that power to the council more so than electing the chief executive, or I guess the mayor would still be elected as well. But
Mr. Dennehy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. John, this is a tough question, but to follow up on Matt's question is the separation of powers between the executive branch and the judiciary branches, in my mind, very important, not only for the foundation of this country and the state government and local government. So when you, and this is totally, you've been very honest, do you think that separation of powers, where the legislative branch becomes now the more authoritative portion of this local government, hiring the city manager, city county manager, having them, the city county manager, he or she, having that representation and having that authority vested in you as a city county commissioner, is that something that you would be in favor of, or are you in favor of having the separation of powers between the executive branch of government and the legislative branch of government? I know that's a tough question, but well, I'm asking it.
sure. I would say that you need to have that defined line of the legislative and executive branch of government. The process that we're talking about, where the city council appoints the city manager, is definitely going to blur the lines, right? Because the council is going to be working with the manager. That, you know, in here I wrote a note that if there's a member of the public that doesn't like what I do, their first response to me is, I'm going to get you unelected in the next term. Well, that now is going to shift from the commissioners saying, you know, I'm going to work to get you kicked out of that office if you don't do what I want. And so I think it just goes to show that there's no perfect form of government that you're going to have. I mean, it'll help in some regards and it'll hurt in the others. And it really is defining what is there. I think some advice that I would give the study commission is think outside the box here. Don't just take somebody else's form of government and run it to its full potential. There might be a better option out there that just needs to be found.
If I could follow up, you mentioned, and I think about this a lot too, what problem are we trying to solve? Like, how do we best solve the issues that we have? How would you describe the problem that we're trying to solve? You have a lot of experience. You've wrestled with the questions. What would you define that problem as?
To pinpoint the problem, I don't know. I think the overall problem is at some point somebody did not get what they wanted, and they think that because the method or the procedure that's been established didn't get them there, that they think that there's a better way to do it to get what they wanted. They as in, as a whole kind of a thing. As far as, pinpointing the problem, there's lots of them, but again, on the other form of government, there's still going to be problems that are going to have to be, fixed. And another thing that comes up quite a bit too is that the reason Butte's not expanding is because of our form of government, and that's, stagnation or stagging or slowing our community down, and I don't think that's the case. I think it's, as a community as a whole, it always seems that we want change, and we say how much change we want until the change is here. And then once the change is here, then everybody starts to throw up their hands and say, wait a minute, I don't want it to impact me at all. I want it to impact my neighbor. And from a business side of things, it doesn't take long for people to hear that if they know they're going to hit that on the front end, that it's probably worth looking somewhere else. But we've also had other businesses come in with open arms, and they love the community. And, just depending on what people pick and choose what they're going to attack is, can determine a lot too. You're still going to have that in any new form of government that you're going to find.
Excellent. Any other follow-up questions, commissioners? Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess, and thank you for all your insights. It's very valuable for us to hear everyone's perspective from the commission. I think that, change, like you said, change is hard. And I think that I want your opinion on this, because I think that even as we are talking about changing the form of government with city county manager, an elected mayor, or whatever that correct terminology is for a city county government. It may be just elected chief executive still. But currently, I would suggest that the executive branch holds the power than the legislative, with the direction of the county and that. So if we were to go to a city county manager and a professional administrator, yes, it would go towards the legislative branch, but then again, that goes back to the education of the constituent. But I guess I want your opinion with regard to the elected piece of this and the person elected to represent Butte, because there are so many organizations and things out there that Butte can be promoted. You mentioned the League of Cities and Towns, MACO, for the counties across the state of Montana, and other things. So do you think that would, in essence, do you feel like it's needed for Butte-Silver Bow to separate those two functions in order to get the most efficiencies and bang for the buck? Because right now I think that that's lacking a little bit, because it's just so hard to do those two things adequately.
Thank you, Ms. Purdue-Dolan. Yeah, it goes back to there's only so much time during the day. And so as you have a chief executive that gets phone calls and emails and everything, at all hours of the night, I think it's going to be hard for them to just focus on one particular thing, and the thing that they focus on might not be what that one constituent wants. And so that's the individual that's going to, go after the witch hunt on them, if you will, of how to get that corrected. I'll be honest, as far as the mayor duties go, I don't know for sure what that role would look like. I haven't dove very far into that mayor side of things. To me, they're kind of that front person for the city. They're the ones that are out there, talking to the constituents in a more personal arena. They would be elected but they would be able to take things back and work with the council to come up with solutions to issues. So.
Any other thoughts, commissioners? It's funny to say commissioner. So, Mr. Morgan, anything else from your perspective that you'd like to share?
I don't think so. I think I just go on record thanking each and every one of you for putting your time into this process. I know that, following the meetings and looking to see all the meetings that you guys have had, there's quite a few. And I think it's neat to see you guys diving in so deep on what the study commission does. I know that they've happened in the past. I had no idea what this commission, did until this year, working with everybody on this of what the ex officio does and all that stuff. It's like, I have no idea. And so it really was a grassroots effort from you all to get this process going, ahead of everything. It sounds like there's been good response from, directors in the county, to county commissioners, that type of thing. And kudos to you all, because everybody has a solution, or they have a problem, but not very many people have a solution. And I think that's what you are all here for, is to find that solution that Butte can continue to move forward into the future.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you. Who would like to go next? Ms. Healy.
Hello, I'm Trudy Healy. I represent District 8.
Excellent. And you saw how this goes, and
Yes.
we can be, back and forth. So
Yeah.
feel free to add in things that you would like to. And I'll start with Ms. McCormick, if we could, with question 1.
Thank you, Chair Brendel. Welcome, Ms. Healy. We'll just start with question 1. What unique duties, responsibility, or challenges do you face serving the citizens of your district?
Yeah. Enforcement of codes. I started out as a neighborhood activist, seeing that my neighborhood was turning into a ghetto, and starting to learn about city codes, and starting with one particular thing is the amount of garbage and junk vehicles that were in my neighborhood, and finding out that there's actually codes that should have been enforced in order to keep my neighborhood from falling to urban decay. And I started off just, picking up garbage and talking to neighbors and seeing their challenges on my own, just because I just couldn't believe my neighborhood was getting worse. So then I started, listening to the people, and then taking it from there. And then it's been a challenge to switch from neighborhood activists and fighting all the time, and I'm part of a team now, and that's been a challenge. I have knowledge in certain things, and so if I do get a citizen who, they can ask for my help, and I help them, I'll help them, but I'm not an enabler. If they come back and they have the same problem, then I'll say, okay, here's what I'll do, but what are you gonna do? Here's what I'd like you to do. This is your community as well. I wasn't getting paid to do what I was doing. I just believed that it could be better.
Excellent. Follow-up questions? Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Trudy, for being here. I just wanted to say from your last comment, and something we really have not heard any elected official say, and I think it's very profound, that you said you're part of a team, but the team includes your constituents. it includes everybody in Butte-Silver Bow who lives here, and that if you are in a district and you have a commissioner, you're working with them. And I really commend you for saying that, because I don't think we've heard that yet, and that might go to everyone's point to say, you know, we want more engagement, and especially us within the study commission for the next, you know, until November 26. But letting folks know that, you know, we need you as part of this team. And so thank you for saying that. That's really something. That's great.
All right. Mr. Silk, number 2.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Healy, for being here. Question number 2, do you feel that any of the duties and responsibilities assigned to commission members by Butte-Silver Bow's existing charter need to be revised or removed?
I will answer this honestly. In my ignorance, I do not know all of the charter, so I don't have an answer at this time.
Ms. Healy, you talked about being an activist in your neighborhood. So was that just an informal sort of process that you kind of door knocked, got people together? Could you describe that a little bit for us?
So it just happened when I'm just standing on my porch looking at the devastation. I look like I came from from a third world country. And it's like, why does my neighborhood look like this? So I just started picking up garbage on my own. And then people would be in their yards, and I just started talking to them, and I'd just say, hey, how's it going? And then I'd start to hear about the crime or the drug addicts taking over their properties and parking junk vehicles on their properties. And so I just started just by picking up garbage. And then I went on to junk vehicles. And I'm like, why are all these junk vehicles on our streets when there's an ordinance for it? And my neighborhood, I will tell you this, it was a hard fight, but my neighborhood looks so much better. But it's been a battle, and that's why I'm emotional, because it's been hard.
One of the things that we are considering and that Mr. Banderob has been bringing to us regularly is the idea of neighborhood councils. I'm assuming you would have found something like a structure like that helpful in your endeavors.
Yeah. Can you ask that again in maybe a different way?
Sorry. We were talking about we've been looking at neighborhood councils, and I'm assuming that as a commissioner now, would you employ or utilize the neighborhood council in your area to?
I feel like I'm already doing that. I mean, I still pick up garbage, and I'm helping in other districts. You know, whoever reaches out to me, I'm going to help. I don't care whose neighborhood it is. So yes, I was just a citizen myself getting involved, so.
Thank
Yes.
you. Yeah. Mr. Dennehy, number 3.
Commissioner Healy, thanks for coming tonight. Could the Council of Commissioners be more effective and better meet the needs of our community by having fewer members that are compensated as full-time city county officials or commissioners?
I'm
What's
an
your feelings?
advocate for full-time commissioners. As I've become a commissioner, I'm sad to say I've recognized my limitations because I work 10-hour days. I mean, my only benefit where I can help more is because my kids are grown. You know, I don't have a husband, so I do have extra time to help, but I'm still limited in who I can help. I'm working on 3 projects right now, and, you know, it's exhausting when you work a 10-hour day. But I am an advocate because I think that I'm going to say the number 6 is what I'm thinking, because of I was thinking that, you know, you could just divide the districts. But I just think that 6 full-time then could give attention to the citizens. I mean, to me, this is about the people of Butte being heard. And I think if there were 6 full-time commissioners, that they could deal with situations on a full-time basis. It's so hard because you want to help.
Follow-up questions? All right. Number 4.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Healy. If the number of commissioners were to be reduced, what do you think would be important considerations to ensure fair representation of amongst residents throughout the geographic boundaries of Butte-Silver Bow?
So, as I mentioned, I thought 6, since there was 12, if you cut them in half to 6, and then you have 12 districts, and in looking at that, you could say, you know, which districts are close. You still represent your district, but also, Commissioner Morgan said, you still represent the entire Butte. I am not contained to my district, but it helps me to see what's going on in my district, but you're still going to reach out. So I think 6, and then just dividing, you know, the closest ones where the numbers are fair.
Follow-up questions? Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I want to get your opinion on the fact that if the commission were to be less number of people working full-time, we have been hearing that the ability then, if you're full-time, to work with department heads, because a lot of information you get thrown at on a Wednesday evening, and working full-time is very difficult to catch up, especially if things are very technical. You know, we have Superfund in our county, and so we will continue to have that until everybody's gone. It will never end.
Yeah.
But give us your opinion on that aspect as well, not only helping the people of Butte-Silver Bow as residents, but also working with folks in the courthouse to get up to speed as a commissioner.
Yeah, I can use that example, because today I had to cancel my 10 o'clock canceled, and I ran right up here to meet with the safety director, James Ouellette, because I had some questions regarding some contaminated water. And although it wasn't his, it took time because I thought he was health and safety, but it's ADA, right? So, I mean, I'm still learning. But we had a great conversation, and he told me he would help me, you know, to get to the right person. So that took time, and then I had to run back to work. So you're correct. I mean, I would have more time to go here and go here, but I had time for one. And, you know, I had to prioritize what I was going to do.
Any other follow-ups? All right, Ms. Dolan, you're on 5.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So many of Butte-Silver Bow department directors and elected officials have suggested that government efficiency be better served by an executive branch comprised of a hired city-county manager and an elected mayor. What are your thoughts as to a city-county manager, mayor, compared to the current chief executive form of government?
And looking at our community and how it's growing, and then looking at the larger communities around us that are already using city managers, well, we're city county, but they're using city managers. So I have looked into it. Can I just read from what I wrote? So I am for city county manager. So here's why. City county managers are typically trained professionals with experience in public administration, budgeting, infrastructure, and personal management. They're chosen based on qualifications, not on popularity or political alignment. Managers are less subject to political cycles and can provide long-term continuity across elected councils. This stability can lead to more consistent policy implementation and better long-term planning. Managers are nonpartisan and ideally neutral, reducing political pressure and favoritism in daily operations and hiring. It helps prevent patronage systems or personal agendas from dominating governance. Accountability to the council. City county managers serve at the pleasure of the elected council, which represents the community's democratic will. If the manager underperforms, they can be fired without waiting for an election cycle. So accountability, I guess, is what I'm saying there. City county manager would be held more accountable. Since managers focus solely on administration, not campaigning or legislative duties, they can often run the city more efficiently. Their decisions tend to be driven by best practices and data rather than public sentiment. Managers can handle routine operations and crisis more swiftly without needing political approval for each action. So those were some of the things I was thinking.
Any other follow-up questions? Ms. Healy, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
I just want to say that I'm grateful for this study coming at this time, because I think as our community is growing, there needs to be changes. And yes, change is hard, but change isn't bad. And there needs to be change because we are growing, and there has to be, we have to grow with it.
Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you. And thank you for running. Appreciate that you saw passion and went for it. So that's good. So Mr. Anderson or Mr. Callahan?
I was told that it was me.
Okay.
What's that? I won the prize. Sweet. What did I win? William Anderson, for the record, Commissioner District 10, reside at 721 West Galena. Thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to come before you all. I thought I had a bit more time when I looked at the clock, so I figured I was going last. So I may run to my book bag at some point and grab some notes I made. But also on that front, I want to thank all of you for being here. I know being on the commission is a very thankless job, and it's a lot of turmoil. You're always in trouble and me nasty calls and everything. So I imagine over the next couple of years, you'll be able to share in the pleasure of all that. I know that most of you are already aware of that, but anyway, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and fire away, I suppose.
And I'm starting to my left with Ms. Casey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Anderson, for being here. The first question is, what unique duties, responsibilities, or challenges do you face serving the citizens of your district?
The main difficulty with my district, I think, is it's an awful lot of college kids. When I look at the voting trends, I pulled up the data on it, but every election I have been in, I've been up here for 15 years, so I think that's 4 elections. The total gets a little bit smaller a few times. I was unopposed, and so it's different. Last time I had 5 people running against me. I always say that politicians are like, you know when your time is up because somebody will tell you your time is up. So that being said, I don't have an awful lot of active people in my district, at least by the votes that are cast in my district compared to some of the other ones. I'd say one of the other main issues and things with my district is it runs through the heart of Uptown Butte on Park Street, Broadway. I have a lot of the bars. We had some contentious issue with those. I had the business district, a lot of contention with some of the rules that the county tried to imply or did imply with whatever new rules were coming through at the time, mainly shoveling sidewalks, stop drinking, and open container laws, and a few other things, tables on sidewalks. So a lot of those issues, I have a lot of people come to me who are business owners who the policies directly affect, but they don't vote in my district. They live in someone else's district. So I can't just say, hey, I'm sorry, but you live in the wrong area. You can't do that. So it's like Commissioner Morgan said earlier, you're kind of a commissioner of the whole city. I have friends throughout the community, and the one thing I've noticed and one thing I've always done is that when I have a problem, I don't go scrolling through the yellow pages to find out the person who's going to help me solve that problem. I look at my contacts list and I say, hey, I know George, or I know Bob, or I know John Morgan, or I know Commissioner Anderson. you're going to call the person who you know, because you're going to get the help you need. You want to help your friends and your buddies with that. So I think one of the problems is that in my district especially, is that you're juggling a lot of different things and a lot of different issues that you won't necessarily see in other districts. You don't have a lot of business activities on in District 12, say. But in District 10, I don't deal with people who are growing a feed or livestock or doing farming. So it's the diversity of the county is very evident when you look at Butte and then consolidated the county with Divide and Melrose, et cetera, and the outlying areas. So I think my problems aren't really that much different than anybody else's. We all have that unique issues or unique balance that we have to go through. So what I try to do is work with the business owners as much as possible. I like to walk uptown. I like to ask people if they have any problems. I'll leave a card out with people when they complain about something. So just little idiosyncrasies like that.
Follow-up questions? Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So thank you, Bill, for being here. Really appreciate your time. So I know it's probably going to bleed into other questions, but because you brought up the idea of the uniqueness and also in the diversity of districts and the fact that people go to who they know, because that makes sense. If I know you, I'm going to ask you a question if I'm not sure who my commissioner is. But with the question of at-large versus districts, if the number of commissioners were to get smaller, what are your feelings about a commission that's made up of at-large participants that could cover the whole community versus just split up into maybe bigger districts?
And again, this is going to be a complete and totally cop-out answer, but I will explain my reasoning for it. I like a mixture of both. Both of them have unique opportunities for problems, and both have unique opportunities for solutions. And I think where that comes from is how the person running, and I'll just use myself for an example, how are you going to govern? Are you going to, you're all sitting in those chairs because you decided to take time out of your life for the next couple of years to show up here every Monday afternoon. I did likewise for Wednesday afternoons. If it was Thursday, I don't know what I would do. Mondays would be real difficult because I like football. But we weigh our priorities. And Thursdays and Mondays would be difficult for me. I like football, but I could watch the game later on. It's not that big of a deal. And as you get older, your values changed. I've been up here for 15 years. When I first started at 37, my values have shifted drastically now at 52. So I think having a good mix of people is terribly important. I like different ages, I like different genders, I like different ideas of thought. I have a lot of people call me the only Republican up here. I have a lot of people tell me I'm way too conservative. I have a lot of people who tell me I'm way too liberal. I have a lot of people who tell me I don't have a friggin' clue. But I always do what I think is right. And for that question, I think that it entirely depends on who's elected. You don't want to get into a situation where it becomes too partisan or too political or anything like that. I think how you choose people matters just as much, which goes back to I like both. I've thought about this numerous times, and there were some questions I heard asking about mayors and how you would go about choosing people. I'm going to take off my commissioner hat and put on my king hat. I think if you wanted to really do some good, you'd just appoint a dictator or a king. It seems to work sometimes. There's a lot less argument. But what I would do is I would implement the city manager style. I think it has an awful lot more benefits, and I think it would alleviate some of the problems that we currently have. I would have 5 commissioners running. I would have 4 commissioners, 3 districts, and 2 at large. I would divide them up every 4 years like we currently do. On the non-presidential year, I would have the 3 districts chosen. I think that is easier to run the election that way. It doesn't put as much, and also there's less turnout that way. In the presidential year, I'd run 2 at-large commissioners, with the at-large commissioner receiving the most votes being the appointed the title of mayor. So that's the mixture that I would use if I was king for a day and I could magically wave a wand and have Merlin come in and do his thing and fix everything. I think that would be the best way. It would set up another can of worms with the 2 commissioners voting and but then the mayor would cast that tie-breaking vote in those situations. But I think it would alleviate some of the favoritism. I think you have a good mix of the at-large, somebody who represents everybody, and somebody who can concentrate more on a specific area's needs, be it the business district, being it residential, or being the rural portion of our county.
Thanks for jumping ahead on most of the questions. We have answered 4 of them in one question, but number 2, we didn't. So Ms. Dolan, if you'd like to take that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks again, Bill. Good insight so far. Do you feel any of the duties and responsibilities assigned to commission members by Butte-Silver Bow's existing charter need to be revised or removed?
I looked at that one quite a bit also because it was interesting to me. And I would revise an awful lot of them because there's language in the charter that isn't very specific. There's an awful lot of may. There's not a lot of you should or you shall, but there's an awful lot of you may. I'm going to put on my R. Edward Vanderub because he's in here, and something that he's been championing for an awful lot of years. And that is a community group and smaller community councils that would talk to the commissioners and help them. I have a cousin of mine in Missoula who's on one of those community councils, and it does really well. It does surprisingly well. And I would like to see something like that implemented. I think the more active participants you have in government, the better your government is. And so there are a few issues like that I think would be helpful if some of the languages were curtailed and looked at and if it was gone over with a little bit more thought and insight. I guess I would add to that also, when you're looking at if you are seriously concerning overhauling the amount of commissioners and full-time commissioners or what have you, I think that whole section should definitely be rewritten. I think you have a nice framework there, but if this is going to be something that's done full-time, it's something that's going to require an awful lot of modification from what is currently, from how things are currently ran.
Excellent. Mr. Steppen, I think we've already kind of gone through them, but if you want to go ahead and see if there's anything with number 3 you want to add to Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. Could the Council of Commissioners be more effective and better meet the needs of our community by having fewer members that are compensated as full-time city-county officials? And you gave us a pretty good answer with that respect. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I could add an awful lot to all of these, so, and if anybody wants more clarification or anything else, please let me know. I'll use myself for an example here. I think everybody here most of you are fairly aware of my health concerns the past few years. I feel like I'm a part-time commissioner in a lot of ways. I've missed an awful lot of time due to health concerns and running back and forth to Seattle, and sometimes just do not have the strength or energy to be up here. I think, and it weighs on me quite a bit, honestly. I feel bad about it. I talk to people, I've talked to an awful lot of people, and they don't seem to mind too much. I mind sometimes, and I think we're all our worst critics in that regard. If it was a full-time position, I don't honestly think I would have the strength or the wherewithal to put in the time and energy that it's required. I know that the makeup of the council is very diverse. When I first started here, there was quite a few retired people. Now there's a lot more. I was one of the youngest. I was the second youngest. And now I think I'm probably the third eldest. So there's a big change there. And like I said, my time has given me a lot of insight in how that would work. I do think it would work better if the commission was full-time. I don't think when you're raising a family and you have a full-time job and you have the stress of the kids being sick and you're planning a vacation with your wife or what have you, or you have the kids' soccer game coming up, you're not putting your full effort, energies, and concentration into the job. I know that over the past few years, there's been times where I kind of forced myself to do so. And I know there's other times where there was just no way I was physically able to do a lot of what was required. I will get on my phone and make a phone call. I'll send emails. I'll talk to as many people as I can. Case in point, one issue that affects my district, more so than I think a lot of others, is fireworks. I had just gotten out of surgery. August 2 years ago, I had a valve repaired in the heart, and I was sitting in the recovery area and my phone rang, and stupidly enough, I answered it. And it was somebody complaining about fireworks because somebody just shot off a bunch of fireworks on August 12th and scared their dog, and they were very mad about it and wanted fireworks banned. And their community in California would never allow fireworks, and so he did not understand why there was fireworks in Butte. I said, well, we're not California for one. We like firecrackers and a lot of noise, and I really wish people wouldn't do it, but people are going to do it. And he goes, well, you need to make it illegal. And it's like, no, it doesn't bother me. And he just kept on going, and it's like, I'm sorry, I'm just out of surgery. I hung up the phone on him. I got a call back asking who he could complain to. I said, call up the courthouse and ask for J.P. Gallagher. And he goes, is he your supervisor? And it's like, no, you're my supervisor. I'm not talking to you anymore. I hung up my phone and I turned it off. And I feel bad about it. And it's probably not a good thing to share on a public. It's very easy to turn that off. It's kind of weird being on this side of the microphone. I'm Chad, Mr. Silk, I want my chair back. It's easier up there. So no, there's always going to be something, but if there was a full-time position, I think it would alleviate an awful lot of the stress, the problems. I think a lot more insight would be put into place. I don't think would be rushing some things. I think it would get rid of the idea that the council is a rubber stamp. One thing I've heard more than anything in 15 years sitting up there was that we're a rubber stamp. I've been yelled at by numerous chief executives on numerous times that my job was to say yes when they told me to. The last time I heard, we were an equal branch of government. I'm not here to rubber stamp what the chief executive says or what he wants. I will use he because all of them have been male since I've been here. I hope soon that will change, but so far it hasn't. But if it was full-time, I think there'd be a lot more respect for the legislative body. I think there would be a lot more understanding of the legislative body and the departments and this chief executive branch. I've been told by department heads numerous times when I ask them questions, why don't you know this? You should know this. It's like, now I know a lot more than I did, but when I first started, I was working 60 hours a week with 2 different jobs, plus this one, so 3 different jobs, trying to learn everything and catch up. And some people were great. Some of the department heads were wonderful. Some of them were absolutely terrible. So if it was full-time, it would alleviate an awful lot of those issues. You ask Commissioner Morgan about the question about implementing the government and how it would change and how he would do that. If it was a full-time commissioner, it would alleviate an awful lot of that change. They would be brought up to speed a hell of a lot faster than any of us have been. In that vein, I've tried my hardest to be a good advocate and help everybody I could. When they were elected, all the newbies, I try to help them and guide them as much as possible. And sometimes I give good advice. As most of you know, there's a lot of times when I give really poor advice, but I would counter that by saying you get what you pay for. In that regard, the city of Butte has been stuck with me for 15 years, making critical decisions for Butte. And if I am one of the 12 or 13 most qualified people to make decisions that affect the community of Butte-Silver Bow, then we have a whole laundry list of problems that aren't going to be addressed in the next 50 years. Because the idea that I would be one of the most qualified is absolutely preposterous. There's way too many better people out there who should be running for these seats, who should be being involved in government, but they will not because of the abuse, the lack of respect, the time commitment, the money involved, the return on investment, and everything. So again, it goes back to you get what you pay for. If you have a part-time person, like I said, with a job or two, and a wife and a couple of kids, they're not going to be able to pay as much attention to the agenda items. They're not going to be going through the budget as closely as they should. They're not going to be questioning the department heads as well as they should. They're not going to be able to look at land development. They're not going to be able to looking at zoning regulations as well as they should. So in that regard, I think it would be very beneficial to make some changes, but I would caution you to watch out for what you ask for because you may get it.
Very good. Are any follow-up questions? Mr. Dennehy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bill, you answered a lot of the questions in your responses so far. This one is a little different, though. Say that we reduce the number of commissioners and they're full-time. How would you consider to ensure fair representation or throughout the commission? I guess the geographic boundaries. How would you, do you have any thoughts on how you would try to map out where the geographical boundaries would be, say for your 3 commissioners and then 2 at large? Of course, the at large you wouldn't have a boundary, but how about the 3? Have you thought that far ahead, or?
I have, in a sense. I think I kind of thought of it as a stool, like a 3-legged stool. You want to have a balance. It's not going to balance. It's not going to do you a darn bit of good if you chop off one of the legs. And I think that's kind of happening a little bit, but it's with our current form. You can look at the commissioner map over here. All the areas are supposed to be divided equally amongst voters. Like I said, I think 1, 2, possibly 9 all have a tremendous amount of votes cast in those areas, probably 6. I wish I had that up here with me. I could tell you for sure. I have one of the fewest. I have definitely the smallest one, number 10 there, the kind of teal color. And it's just a little bit of sliver. I have the tech campus. I have a lot of the Mansion Row on Excelsior and Park Street. I also have the business district. I also have Silver Bow Homes. So it's kind of like representing the group in Charles Dickens. You know, it's the best of time for a lot of these people and probably the worst of times for a lot of these people. You have the poor and the destitute, and you have some people living in rather wealth. And I don't know if he would say that so much anymore, but 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I'd say more so in our community. But I think you'd want to take a look at probably getting some of the business area, so the uptown area, the business corridor in the uptown, the hospital, Montana Tech, some of those groups with a good portion of Butte, and putting that in one leg of the stool. I think you put a lot of the suburb areas on another leg of the stool, and you're definitely going to have to balance that with probably 9, 6, and 1 with the rural communities to get that area balanced. But then you're going to have a good mix of the business, the industrial areas, schools, tech, some of the larger, somebody who can focus on a lot of those business activities, somebody who can focus on the school, the mining operation, somebody who can represent those interests a little bit better and talk to those and focus on it without dealing a lot with the people. I think that would be helpful. I don't want a delegate who's just representing business. That's a terrible idea, but somebody who understands what's going on with them so they can do that. And somebody who's definitely understands agriculture and some of those agricultural needs in those rural areas. The problems that affect somebody on Park Street are nowhere near remote the same problems that's going to affect somebody in Divide or Melrose, for that matter. They're going to have some cross sections, but not very many. But I think I would look at that. And if that wasn't possible, the other thing I'd like to do is make sure there was a good, healthy mix of all three amongst the legs of the stool. And I think the important thing with that is that the at-large would benefit and counteract that a little bit. The one thing where I kind of teeter on quite a bit, would it be better to have 2 districts who were voted and 3 at-large, or the 2 at-large with 3 districts? And that's where I think I vacillate the most in between that question, more so than some of the others.
Thank you.
I hope that answers your question. I really like that question because it makes you think an awful lot. It does make you think an awful lot, and you have to really have a good reason to justify it. And I can see both ways where it would be better to have more at-large or more districts. It's kind of a tightrope that you're walking, and I think you'd have to hammer it out on this body if you make that decision or come to the conclusion that you want to make that decision, which would be better. But I can see a lot of good with either one. But whatever you're going to go with, you're going to have the equal number of problems on the inverse.
Good point. Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So let me ask you this, Bill. You mentioned earlier that, and I thought this was a good point that you made, because I didn't even think of that. When you have a lot of the business district in District 10, and then those business owners may have a property in, let's say, Park Street, but they live down on the flat, and so they have a different commissioner. So in your role as a commissioner, in the business district, how do you work that? Do you say to them, I can help you business-wise, and then refer to, let's say, John Morgan, District 1 down on the flat? And how does that reciprocity work currently? Because I'm sure we'll have a lot of people that don't want change and want to keep the status quo, and just to inform them how you work through that because of the way you're represented in your particular district.
Honestly, it depends quite a bit on the issue that comes before me. If it's something like the street being plowed or a pothole or something going on that I can make a phone call and get it taken care of relatively easily, I'll do that. If it's something that's going to be a fight in council, I think the biggest issue where this comes up was, there's two that I remember in the last 15 years. The most recent one I'll use and cite for an example. And I'm trying to recall all the details of it. My mind's been going on 1,000,000 miles an hour the last week with a ton of personal things and everything else. But this was one I thought about quite a bit when I was looking at these questions. There was a proposal put in, and I just can't remember all the details, so please forgive me for that. But what it was going to do is require businesses in the uptown who wanted to put up chairs, tables outside the restaurants or bars to purchase another, to pay additional taxes. And it was quite high. It was quite high. I remember Mr. Orizati, I believe it was, at Pork Chop John's. I was getting a pork chop one day, and he saw me, and I talked to him for a few minutes, grabbed his card, and I told him, and I just wrote out the commissioners at a whole. I don't know who his commissioner is. I wasn't going to take the time to look it up. I just gave him the email address for all 12 of us because it was an issue that required an awful lot of thought, and everybody should be made aware of. I thought it was unjust. I thought it was putting a excess burden on a lot of the businesses, so on and so forth. So I made sure that they had the tools that he needed to get a hold of everybody. As I talked to other businesses, the Pita Pit, the Taco del Sol, and some others, I did the same with them. I went around the neighborhood and just kind of gave everybody a little heads up if I believed that they would be affected by this business, by this idea. And some of them showed up. A few of them wrote letters and a few things, but a great many did not. That kind of brings me to the idea that the government's only going to work for you as much as you put into it. If you want to get something done with it, show up here with 50 or 60 people, and a lot of us will vote for you. Because for whatever reason, you might be right, you might be wrong, they might be scared, they might just agree with you, or whatever reason. You know, you get a whole bunch of people saying they all want the same thing. We're politicians, we want to sit in those chairs for whatever reason, so we're going to do what that big group, that big mob tells us to. And so using that philosophy, I always felt that the mob mentality really holds an awful lot of weight. So I would tell the people to get involved, write a letter, show up, get other people who are affected by this, have them show up. Have your customers write a letter saying, I want to eat my lunch on the corner of Park and Montana. It's what I do. I think this is charging too much. Fix it. And we got a few of those things, and about 4 weeks later, the rates were cut in half. And was it in small part by something I did? Possibly. Did people just wise up and think that it was a little bit unfair? Possibly. I was glad it was changed. That's all I wanted to see. I wanted to see it changed. But when you put pressure on a politician, they will usually change.
Thank you. Mr. Silk, I think Mr. Anderson answered the city manager question, but if I could, is there anything that you wanted to add to that in terms of the city manager position, city county manager?
There's a few more things I would add to it. When I first read this question when it came across my email, and then when I was looking at it, it reminded me almost, well, it did remind me of it. It's kind of there is kind of not. It was a joke a dear friend of mine would tell me 100 times. And so if you will indulge me, it was one of Father Southfield O'Sullivan's favorite stories. With my interest in politics, he would tell it to me all the time. But there was a farmer and he was plowing a field, and he came across a genie's lamp, and the genie popped out and said, "I'll give you one wish." This is a very brief version of the tale, and it's probably been shared 1,000,000 times. And the guy looks at the genie and says, "Well, I don't know what I want." And he goes, "Well, think about it, and I'll be back tomorrow, and tell me what you want, and I'll make it happen." And so the farmer goes home, and he thinks about it all day. And genie pops up at noon the next day, and he goes, "Well, O'Malley's down there has a cow." And they have this cow, and so they would milk the cow, and they'd always have fresh milk, and their boys were nice and strong. And they'd take the milk from the cow, and they'd sell it, and their daughters had a nice dowry, so they married the rich bankers, and they got the better loans and everything else. And the genie goes, "Okay, so you want a cow?" And the guy just looked at him for a second. "No, I don't want a cow. I want his cow to die." And I think in politics, all too often, we're not in the business of creating more cows. I think way too often politicians are viewed as a tool to, we're trying to take away somebody else's livelihood. We're trying to take away somebody else's thing. Personally, I think, and you asked me for my opinion, so I'll give it to you. My opinion is that the current chief executive is ripe with favoritism. I think it's way too many cronyism, way too much of favoritism. I think way too often we're hitting one person over the head and completely ignoring the person who is following right behind them. If any of you want specifics for this, I'll be happy to give it to you in a private conversation that I don't think really needs to be broadcast over the airwaves, but I'm pretty sure we have all seen it. I am pretty sure I know somebody on your board up here has lived it, where a group of people have got together, and we need to make sure whatever we do, we need to stop this individual because they think X. And when you have people in your form of government, when you have leadership in your government who is meeting with other leaders in the government saying we need to stop elected representatives and silence them because they think X, we're living in a very, very dangerous situation. Butte is a wonderful community. I love Butte. I spent my life growing up between Butte and the Ruby Valley. Both have an awful lot of benefits. Both have wonderful things that you can't experience anything else, but they both have a tremendous amount of good and bad. One of the great things about both communities is the sense of neighborship. I can't walk anywhere in town anymore without somebody knowing who I am and asking me how I'm doing. I walked through the hospital today with my stepdaughter, and it was very nice. I had 4 or 5 people asking how my heart was doing. Are you okay? You're at the hospital. Is everything okay? And it's like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm just helping Corinne here with a few things. You know, we just went up there on nothing medical at all. It was just fun. But everybody knows you. And when everybody knows you, everybody can use you. Everybody can manipulate you. Somebody mentioned the big and the powerful families in town. It's like, well, if George gets a job, then I'm pretty sure I can get the family to vote for you. And when you're looking at 50 or 60 votes, that can be a big thing. If we have a county manager, I think it takes away an awful lot of the politics. I think it takes away an awful lot of the favoritism. I think it takes away an awful lot of the rest of the, excuse my language, but bullshit that goes around up here on a weekly and monthly basis, where we are expected as a body to be a rubber stamp for whatever group and to do what they say because they are full-time and they know better than what we do because they do it day in and day out. And they do have a better idea of what is going on because they do it day in and day out. But just because they have a better idea of it doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do. So, and I believe the question was, because I got off on a little bit of a rant there, was, I like to rant, by the way. I recently heard there's a fun game going out there called Commissioner Bingo, and the different commissioners have little squares tied to them. And one of the ones is Commissioner Anderson goes on a rant. So if I give you a bingo, congratulations, I want my cut. But would the city manager alleviate all of these problems? No. Would they go away overnight? No. Would there still be plenty of problems in our community? Yes. But it goes back to the story. The people don't necessarily get the government that they want. My grandpa would always tell me, we get the government that we deserve. When we vote against this for that or that for this, or allow the crony capitalism or all the other BS that goes on behind closed doors to go on, and we allow it, then we deserve the government that we get. And so I would applaud you for trying to fix an awful lot of those issues.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Any follow-up questions? Right. Thank you so much. We appreciate you coming and spending your time and giving us your point of view. And Ms. Dolan does have a follow-up question.
Not a question. You can just leave 25 cents for the swear jar. Thank you.
I will have to owe you the 25 cents. I will make sure it's on Ms. Brandel's desk at the end of Wednesday's meeting. So
Perfect.
There will be a quarter there. I don't think
like
I
it.
have one in my pants pocket, but let me check.
I like it. Thank you.
But no, well, thank you. And I'll just echo what Commissioner Morgan said. I was outside when Commissioner Healy spoke, but I'm sure like I said at the beginning of this, it's a thankless job and it's a thankless task. And so thank you to each and every one of you for listening to me rant for 40-some minutes. Now you get to be a part of what everybody else complains about on Wednesdays. But thank you for the time and energy you're putting into this. I know that all of these are hard decisions, and I know that they'll weigh on your conscience and everything. I hope they do. I hope they'll weigh on you, and you'll take on the gravity of the situation to make our community a better, healthier, safer place. And whatever your recommendations are in a couple years, I look forward to seeing them. And I don't know if I'll be around in 2 years, but if I am, I will look forward to helping implement them and further help our community. It's a great community. It just needs to be whipped into shape a little bit. So thank you very much. Make sure you keep a tight leash on us and do a great job, and I'm looking forward to your conclusions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Callahan. Commissioners, how are you? Do you need a 10-minute recess and a pizza? Okay, we'll take 10 minutes if that's okay with you. Thank you. So we'll reconvene at 7:20, please.
It's more to the point of broad representation. It's a good question. I don't know how I feel about it, but it's something I've been thinking about. Sure.
Folks, I'll reconvene us. It looks like everyone's back in their chairs and Mr. Callahan is ready to roll. So thank you for dinner. We appreciate you.
You are very welcome. You guys put in long days up here and a lot of hours for volunteering.
Now, Dan, I'll pay attention to you because I ate.
You took your nap the last one, so you should be rested. Just for the record, I'm Dan Callahan. I'm the commissioner for District 12. And if I could, I got a few props if I could pass them out. A little bigger version. I think this is real important. As long as, I guess I'll make a talk after I find the speaker.
I'll help you out since you gave me a piece of pizza.
Oh, I do have a size. Sorry. Thanks, Tim. Yeah.
I've been rubbing off on him. I give him all the answers every Wednesday, so he's confused.
Thank you. Sorry about the delay.
Okay, so I think Ms. McCormick, you are our start this time.
Thank you, Chair Brindle. Hi, Dan.
Ms. McCormick?
I have the first question for you. What unique duties, responsibilities, or challenges do you face serving the citizens of your district?
Thank you, Mary. That's why I brought the props. I serve in District 12, and if you look at your map, it's about 3/4 of Silver Bow County. And that's the challenge. It's not, the challenge isn't so much that it's so big. There's so much involved in that part of the 3/4 of the county. You know, I've got the main county, I've got Walkerville that's got their own city government, and I've got 4 different areas that have their own water and sewer districts. They've got fire districts, they've got school districts. There's a whole lot going on in District 12. And it's not that one person can't handle it all. It's a lot of work, and I definitely try hard and do my best. The problem is you're only one vote. You got 3/4 of the county and you get one vote. And when it comes to things that go on in those areas, one vote doesn't do nothing. You know, we got 2 parts in the rural areas. Russell Larry's district now, he's probably 20%. And if you look at your map, the 10 people are about 5% of the whole county. So those 10 districts could care less about the rural area. If you go back and look at the voting record, it's a tough battle. So my suggestion is somehow we got to get a balance. Every district should have some rural and some urban. There's different ways you could do it. Russ had mentioned last week that he wasn't sure who had brought up the pie. You know, it's just a thought, a pie. If a pie don't work, it doesn't have to work. Give them their district and give them a chunk of the rural. They don't have to be connected. You know, that way they get voters from both ends. If they're not taking care of the people on that end, they can help vote them in or vote them out. You know, we don't have any balance right now, and how it's gone on this long without having a balance is frustrating to me. You know, you work your butt off to help these people, and things go on out there, and you got 10 people could care less because it doesn't affect them. And so I'll just give you an example. You know, we had a park out in Ramsey. The neighborhood of Ramsey went ahead and elected a kind of like a town council, not a town council, but they have their own committee. They charge everybody in the neighborhood a fee, and they take care of their park. So they went in and put a sprinkling system in. They went in and paid people all summer long to take care of this park, which is a city park. City of Butte owns it. The City of Butte wasn't taking care of it. Well, that's out in the rural areas. We don't do the rural areas. We're one city. We're city county. Nobody said rural areas and urban areas. So anyway, they were doing that. They says, fine, we'll take care of it ourselves. They were paying money to take care of it. They were paying people to maintain it. They put their own sprinkling system in. Very nice park, one of the nicest parks in our county. City Parks Department put it on surplus land, sold it out from under them. They had a 100-year lease on this park. They had an agreement with Butte-Silver Bowl that they would take care of the park, and they sold it out from under them. I mean, so some of these neighborhoods are coming back because Lori knows how every neighborhood gets built, there's got to be a portion of the neighborhood that is left for a park. Well, a lot of the parks didn't get developed, and now they're selling them off as properties. Well, this park was developed. I mean, it's probably got the nicest tree system of any park we have in Butte. I mean, it's got almost 50 ponderosa pines, 40, 50 feet tall. It's a beautiful park. They sold the property out from under them. You know, so, and me, as a councilman representing these people, all I did was motion to give these two groups an extra month to sit down at the table and come to an agreement. Couldn't even get a second. You're only one person. You know, these other groups don't care, you know. So, as Russ O'Leary said, you know, two people representing a huge part of the county. Somewhere along the way, we have to fix that. And I think every district, whether you go to 6, if you go to 8, 10, 12. Every district should have rural and urban, and then it's more of a balance. That way, a couple people ain't trying to get things done, voting against 10 that could care less.
Mr. Callahan, to follow up with taxes and I guess income in that regard, is that what Mr. Morgan talked about in other areas where it's the rural districts that have more taxable value and therefore more money to do things? Is that true in Silver Bow County as well?
Well, from my understanding, and I obviously wasn't involved in government back when they changed it. I think I was just in high school or junior high or something. But what happened was the city was broke, and all the industrial taxes were going to the county. If you go back and look at all the mine sites, city boundaries, as Lori could agree, they went around the mines, so they didn't have to pay city taxes. So somebody was sharp enough to figure out that, you know, we need that tax revenue. So they said, let's combine the city and county. And it was a good idea if it worked. And it did work. But the problem is, so they turned around and took all that extra tax money to help the urban, or the community. But the tax money that was helping the outside areas, they lost it. So we have people complaining all the time, our roads and this, that, and the other. And, you know, Lori will remember this, when we went with one across-the-board maintenance fee for our roads. We had, what, 4 or 5 different maintenance fees. And So there was different ones. You know, the Uptown Butte probably had the highest because they got the most maintenance. You know, they had the streets sanded the most. They were the hill, and then they had different ones around our community were different prices. Well, the rural areas weren't actually paying the maintenance fee. So they said, we'll go one straight across the board. So everybody in the county paid the same maintenance fee. They adjusted them all. Well, what happened was everybody in the rural areas still haven't seen any improvements on their maintenance. You know, so they're charging them the tax. Like I think Mr. Flanagan came here about 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, says taxation without representation. You know, they keep taxing these people for services they're not really getting. You know, we had Mr. Neary come up before us once a year. Once we pass that maintenance fee, he's required once a year to come and show how he spends his money. And he flat out says, you know, the rural area, we don't see very often. So those are the kinds of things that, you know, I think we could fix if our commissioners had representation on both sides instead of just make a balance. So the people that are voting have a right to vote whether these people are going to help them or not help them. You know, if you don't have to worry about getting voted out because you're not helping those people, then it's a pretty easy decision.
Other follow-up questions? Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dan, for being here tonight and sharing your thoughts and ideas. I want to just springboard what you've just said to what Commissioner Anderson was talking about with having a mix of at-large and district folks represented on the council. Do you think that having that mix would alleviate or help with some of this rural versus urban representation if you had this kind of at-large person that could be could have that mix? Could that help, do you think, or what is your thought on that?
You know, I originally thought that it would be a good idea at large, but then, you know, I try to come to every time Dan Clark comes to town. And I mean, he's pretty impressive. If you want to learn something, every time I go, I learn something from him. But it seems to me that he said that Bozeman tried that, possibly 3 at large and 3 districts. But he said the problem that they had there was the 3 at large usually come from the same district. So you got one district with 3 people, and then the other, possibly one of those would be in that district too. So you could have 4 from one district and 2 from the rest of the area. So I guess that's something you got to look at with the at large. Yeah.
Any other follow-ups? Mr. Silk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Commissioner Callahan, for being here. Question number 2, do you feel that any of the duties and responsibilities assigned to commission members by Butte-Silver-Bo's existing charter need to be revised or removed?
Yeah, there's lots of things we can do. I certainly believe that the legislative branch and the executive branch should stay separate. To make government work, that's the way it should be. But one of the problems we're having tonight, and I'm sure most every one of the commissioners will say, you know, we're part-time commissioners and we're tired. One of the things we're tired of is we get beat up on a daily, weekly basis over the same problems in our community. We come up here, we pass ordinances, we make resolutions, and then they don't get enforced. And that's what we're tired from. We wouldn't be half as tired if they would follow the resolutions and the ordinances that we draft. If they were followed by our department heads, we wouldn't be getting all these phone calls and stuff that our time needed would be cut a bunch. A good example of, you know, right before Lori had retired, and we were in the process of doing a sign ordinance. 6 years ago we started that. You retired 5 years ago, 4 years ago. The committee just went away. Her department and the committee had put a lot of money, a lot of time into that ordinance. We never ever even finished it. You know, we have ordinances. Here's an example. We got a communication in judiciary right now about the dump. You know, Miss Healy comes up here, and I mean, she's passionate about what she does, and God love her. She gets beat up all the time over it. And we got the dumpsters down there for people to bring. Well, that area is covered in trash, and people driving and not covering their loads. So Mr. O'Leary brought the communication and says, you know, he's got complaints all over the place about trash. Well, we did an ordinance that they have to cover their loads. And that was probably 6 years ago too, something like that, 5, 6 years ago. Something like that. Anyway, so they asked, you know, how many people have we fined? It was a $20 fine. And they told them you either pay the $20 or you can't dump. Well, like Mr. Neary says, you tell them they can't dump, they go outside the gate and they just dump on a rural road somewhere. So that was crazy. We got to get rid of that. But they've never ever given anybody a fine. The judge says he's never had anybody come to him with a fine. So why are we having ordinances that we don't enforce? We've changed our ordinance for community enrichment on shoveling snow and keeping the Blythe cleaned up and stuff like that. We don't enforce it. That's what Trudy's talking about. The battle is trying to get somebody to enforce our ordinances. And like I said, I think the majority of our work as a commissioner is getting the same repeated comments and complaints, and and they say, well, we call somebody. Well, we were told we're not allowed to call somebody. This administration says he will contact the department heads. We're not allowed to call the department heads. That's not our job. We have no authority over the department heads, and they were told not to take phone calls from us. So there's a problem right there, So if there was something we could do, if accountability has to be something that we got to work on somehow. If these people aren't being accountable and the council makes the ordinances and the resolutions and it just doesn't get done, we got to put something in there where the council has some authority, we can go to the next level or something. And I do believe we have to keep the legislative branch and the executive branch separate. But at some point, I mean, this is year after year, we just keep getting beat up over the same things and nothing's getting done. Well, our job would be way easier if we could correct those problems. We wouldn't have to work so hard. We wouldn't have to go to full-time councilmen, I don't believe. This government has worked close to 50 years. Has it worked good? It's only as good as the people we elect in it. It's just a matter of who you put there and how hard they want to work, or you can change the title and you can change the name of any department. You can change they make changes all the time. It's only as good as the people who are going to enforce what we do and what we're supposed to do. So.
Follow-up questions? Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know this question might bleed into some of the other questions, but because you talked about accountability and separation of powers with the executive and the legislative branch, and the example you just gave, I would think that if commissioners were full-time, you'd be on a level playing field with those department heads and the people that work in the courthouse, because they also work full-time. And I think being part-time, just from my own experience as a commissioner, was that we were looked at as less than because we were part-time and we weren't fully read into all of the nuts and bolts of what was going on in Butte-Silver Bow County. We were encouraged to make sure we tried to get up to speed on a Wednesday evening, but do you think that would help with the accountability and the communication aspect of learning the job as a commissioner and being representative of the people in a better light, I guess?
Well, and I think if there was something in there that we had some authority, you'd have to give them some authority. Right now we have no authority for the legislative branch. So we pass the ordinance, we make the resolutions, and then in some cases nothing happens. Here's another example. When I first got on the council, the parking was $200,000 in the red. Cindy, you'll remember that. They put a committee together, and we were going to work on that. And the $200,000 in the red is one thing, but the problem was every year the government gets audited. And if you have the same problem year after year, you get a ding for that. And what the ding costs you is it affects your rate when you borrow money. Say right now we're borrowing money for a compactor out at the dump. It's $750,000 to $1 million for that compactor. So because we haven't fixed that problem in the parking department, that has affected our rate that we borrow that money for that compactor. So it's costing, not only costing the citizens money for not fixing the parking problem, but it's costing us money when we borrow money. Because when you don't fix the problems in your audit, it affects your borrowing rating. And we haven't fixed the problem. And I've been here, I'm on my 9th year. I've asked the question numerous times, and I really haven't got a very straight answer. So that's another example of if the council had some authority, there we go again. You know, we put that committee together. And we worked on it probably, Cindy Shaw was on that committee. We probably worked on it a year and a half. The committee went away. We've never gotten, it just dissolved. Nobody, the parking was supposed to come and report to the council fairly once, 4 times a year or something. We haven't seen them. The only time we've seen the parking was to get the candles. And the candles, I think, are going to be a great thing. But we have to find a way that the council has the authority to be able to have some kind of accountability for if we pass the ordinances, some way, somehow, there's got to be accountability that they're enforced. You know, same way with our ordinance for community enrichment, you know. They wanted to put some more teeth in that so they could shovel snow. Other communities, Bozeman for an example, and they give a report on the news all the time. They put a hanger on your door. You got 24 hours to get that snow shoveled. If it ain't shoveled, they got a private contractor that comes and does it, and they charge you $275 a time. We got businesses up here. They're not businesses no more. We got out-of-town property owners that own these properties, and they won't take care of them. They don't shovel the snow. They don't fix the broken windows. So here was our perfect opportunity to start putting a bill to these people. Go shovel their snow for 6 months. That bill is going to be so high they have to sell the property, and somebody, like Mary's group and them, would take that property and make something out of it. Instead, the buildings are falling down, the roofs are falling off, because we've never enforced our snow shoveling for it. Missoula, Bozeman, Helena, all of them do. And you shovel your snow or else. You know, there was an attorney that lived down there on Broadway Street. And I used this example when we were passing this ordinance. He has to use his motorized wheelchair out in the street because he couldn't get through the uptown sidewalks because half the people didn't shovel their snow. What are we waiting for? We waiting for someone like him to get hit? There was another example. There was a person down on Harrison Avenue. And I see a lot of this because I retired from the delivery business. So I was out and about every day, all day long. There was a gal that every morning she would go to McDonald's for breakfast. And she lived somewhere down there by, I don't know if it was the homes right there by Joe's Pasty. She would take her motorized scooter and go to McDonald's for breakfast every day. And half of that way she'd have to be out in the street. And I mean, that was the example. I said, what are we going to wait until somebody runs one over before we fix this? So they were fixing that problem when they were telling the businesses, you got to shovel and shovel. That went on for one winter, and it never did again, you know. So my hope is there's something, and I don't know, I guess we'd have to talk to Dan Clark to see if there's some way we could figure out something to keep separation of legislative and executive. But at some point, if it's not being done, we have to have some accountability. You know, we're paying these directors pretty healthy salaries. And you go back and look at some of that stuff, and they're not doing it. We have to be able to call them out and say, this is your job. Why are we not doing this? You know, so to me, that's the biggest struggle being on the council. And I think that's where we spend the most of our time, is answering people to the same old things that never ever improve.
Thank you. Follow-up questions? Mr. Dennehy, number 3.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Dan. Just for your memory, in 1977, you were a senior in high school.
I thought I was in high school.
You're a year older than me, and I was in high school.
Well, Con was 76.
Could the Council of Commissioners be more effective and better at meeting the needs of our community by having fewer council members that are compensated full-time? You kind of had that going around and around, so what do you think?
6 of one, half dozen of the other. You know, you're only as good as the people you get in there. I know when this deal came through judiciary to decide whether we were going to put a study commission on this year or not, there was councilmen that wanted to keep the number at 5. I fought like hell, excuse my language, I'm talking like Anderson now, for bigger numbers. I believe you do better with more people. My concern with smaller numbers is same way with at large. You know, you vote people in at large, you get 2 or 3 people that vote from the same area. That's where they're, you know, that's, I believe bigger numbers is better. Full-time, part-time, I think if we had more accountability, I think the part-time works pretty well. Full-time, you'd have to give them more to do. I mean, you give somebody a full-time job, they can't come in for an hour or 2 a day and pay them, say, $80,000 a year, you know. And as you see, you know, this is 3 weeks in a row. You guys have been down 2 people all 3 weeks. It's a matter of who shows up and who don't, you know. And not cutting on you guys are volunteers, but I was just using that as an example, you know. Same with commissioners, you know, there's times we don't have 3 or 4 people there. So if you're down to 3 people, 1 or 2 don't show up, you're down to 1, you don't even have a quorum, you know. It's a full-time job. Obviously, you'd have to find more duties for them because, and like you said, they could talk to the few people had mentioned, they could talk to the department heads and stuff, but they're not their authority, you know. They don't have the authority to tell the department heads we need this done. And so something there would have to be changed. Like I said, we'd have to run this past Dan Clark and ask some questions on stuff like that. I mean, he's so sharp at it that he could tell, you know. Some time back, I had sat and visited with him because, you know, I know a lot of people in the rural area go back to city county in a minute. They saw what happened when the city and county combined. You know, this building right here, this is county courthouse. You know, you guys be working down at City Hall down there on Broadway Street. And so, yeah, they got their taxes increased. You know, some of them people are paying as high or higher than taxes than people in the country club, and they only get about 20% of the services. You know, it's pretty hard to justify you keep raising their taxes because they don't get the services in the rural areas, you know. So to continue pounding on that dead horse, a lot of them are getting pretty tired, you know. The well only has so much in it. You can only pull so much out, and I honestly believe we can make work. Like I said, if we could put the commissioners where it's a balance, where they have urban and rural, every commissioner, I think that would help the rural areas a whole bunch. And I'm not complaining, you know, the rural area gets treated pretty good. There's no doubt, you know. I got to give Mr. Neary and his department, they do a pretty good job. But the rural areas, you know, when you got $1 million, $2 million homes out there, and they're only getting 20% of the services, and they don't see a police officer, they don't see a road grader once a year, you know, they're saying, what are we paying for? You know, so most of them would go back to a city county in a minute. And I talked to Dan Clark, and he says he don't see how that could happen at this point, you know, once you combine everybody and put everything together to turn around and separate that would be. But I think we could work through this. I think it can work. It's worked for the last close to 50 years. It's only as good as the people we put in these positions. You know, you can change every title, you can change numbers, you can change all that. It's only as good as the people we put in the positions. You know, it's, and like I said, my strong point is we got to get more accountability. If we can get more accountability, this government will work. And don't get me wrong, most of our departments work their butts off. We got some very, very hard workers. You go in that courthouse right now, and a lot of those people are still here. We see that on Wednesday nights all the time. You know, some of them come in on weekends. Lori could tell you the hours those people put in, and they put in a lot. You know, so but just an example. You know, this map here. Back when the election, we had to do a recount. In fact, Dan, I think you were, or Lori, you were the one that came out on the good on the recount, right? Anyway, there was a map. There was a map in the clerk and recorder's office. And I says, you know, we don't have a real map in the council chambers. I mean, we got this thing. That's the map. Well, what does that show you? The red-headed stepchild, he's hiding down in the corner down there. And the main people are brightened up and enlarged, and the real area is shrunk down to nothing. So I said, we need a real map so the people can see what the districts are. So I asked back in November. In the last 2 weeks, I've probably tried a half a dozen times. I never have gotten that map. I was in here probably half a dozen times in the last 2 weeks. And I'm not pointing the finger at anybody. We definitely had lots of problems in our GIS office, but whatever. But that map we have up there isn't even accurate. All that purple up there, that isn't District 11, that's District 12. So anyway, I went into Barb's office knowing that I probably wasn't going to have a map to show you guys tonight. The difference between how small 12 districts are compared to 2 districts. So I asked her if she'd just make a copy of the little thing down in the bottom. Well, that little thing down in the bottom's wrong. So we as a council don't even have an accurate map in our council chambers. So in this map here, this purple up here, that's not accurate. That's part of District 12. So anyway, the way I ended up getting this map, I knew I wasn't going to be able to have something to show you guys, give you. I believe in firmly that people have to see the real facts. You can talk to them all you want, but if they don't see it, you're not effective. So I went up to Montana Tech, went to the National Resource Building. Within an hour, I had this map right here. I've been trying for 8 months. When they got onto the Silver Bow website, and you guys can all get on there, it's not even current on our councilmen. Our councilmen have had new councilmen for 6 months, and they're not even current. You know, how does the public find out what's going on and what's not going on? You know, that's frustrating. You know, so I think we need better communication, and we got to find out why those things are happening. We got to figure out ways to fix it. We're the legislative branch. We don't have that authority to go ask questions, and we're told not to do it. You know, so anyway, you know, since I've been on the council, this has been after the first couple of years, I realized, you know, how unbalanced the voting is, and it's been my goal to try to get some kind of way that we can get a gap balance. Like I said, you know, just an example when, you know, Commissioner Shaw said last week she had a huge district. I had a chuckle back there. When I get a call to Melrose, it's 90 miles round trip when I go down to see what they're talking about. These guys can walk their district in 15 minutes. So, you know, we got to get some kind of balance. To me, the best way to do it is give each commissioner a little bit of both, whether we can get it in a pie shape or they can keep their own area and give them a chunk of the rural area. They don't have to be connected, you know, and we can see how I guess we're the only two, us and Anaconda, but there's got to be a way to do something to make it better where the voting, like I said, I'm fine with, you know, covering that big of an area, and but it comes down to the voting is where there's no balance, and it's really hard to get something done. You know, the commissioners get $100 fuel stipend. Well, if you can walk your district in 15 minutes, what do you need a $100 fuel stipend? One trip to Melrose and back is 90 miles to me, and we're all getting the same thing. And that's not a complaint to me. I'm fine with what I'm getting and whatever. But I think to make our government work, we gotta get some balance there. And for a long, long time, there hasn't been a balance, and we need some balance.
Okay, so I think that bleeds directly into question 4. But Mr. Steppen, if you'd like to take that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Dan, thank you again for being here.
Yes.
You touched on this multiple times with your idea of finding the balance between rural and urban with each commissioner, I believe, is what you're saying.
Yes.
So I'll ask the question, and feel free to add anything that you feel is important. If the number of commissioners were to be reduced, what do you think would be important considerations to ensure fair representation amongst residents throughout the geographic boundaries of Butte-Silver Bow?
You know, like I said, numbers, it's just a matter of, you can get 6 good commissioners that'll work really, really well. You could get 6, you could get 3 out of them that work hard and the other don't. It's a matter of who gets elected and who gets in. You know, there's people, I know people since I've been on the commission who worked their butts off. You know, you take this week alone, you know, we got tonight's meeting, we got another meeting tomorrow night for budget and finance, we got council meeting Wednesday night, and some will be there, some won't. Some people have things going on, you understand, they're excused. But some just don't participate like others. And the problem is they're in for 4 years, and then nobody wants these jobs. It's hard to find people to run for these jobs, you know. Kudos to the ones that at least try. And like I say, 6 numbers. You'd have to have a balanced number, I would think, because every 2 years, you know, 2 of them or half of them are up for election, and to keep it split. I'm in favor of bigger numbers. I think you can get way more out of bigger numbers. The smaller the group, the easier it is for a few people to run the show. You know, I think a lot of people say 12's too many. We've had to have times where the chief executives had to decide the vote. You know, so that's a pretty balanced council. You know, and if you can get balance in your government, that's a good thing. You know, you need to get balance. Right now, we don't have balance in our federal government, and look what's happening. So balance is very important.
All right, follow-up questions? Ms. Dillon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I want to go back to, and this might be more of a comment, but I do want your input on this because you've talked a number of times tonight about the authority of the commissioners and the authority that you have as the legislative branch. And, you know, it's hard to distinguish between, you know, authority as far as, you know, the executive branch and those folks deal with hiring and firing and unions and contracts and all of that. But it surprised me tonight to hear you say you're not allowed to talk to department heads. How in the world are you supposed to communicate and get information as a commissioner if you're not even allowed to communicate? And I'm guessing, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, that distinction and that admonition comes from the chief executive. Am I correct on that?
You are correct.
So my suggestion would be, I mean, I'm just kind of astonished by that because I think everyone here sitting on the dais has jobs or even retired, but communication is key to learn and to get that back and forth of information. So it might actually fall under, we go to the 2 buckets. We have the vote of the people on the charter itself, but also recommendations to the commission. I don't know where that would fit, but I would think that'd be very elementary that the commissioners should be allowed to communicate and to ask for advice or get information or ask questions. I mean, that's how we all learn. That's how I learned the job as a county commissioner back in the day. I don't know, maybe I just didn't follow the rule because I would constantly ask questions. So any insights to that would be great, because we got to figure out where to put that, because I think that's a big stumbling block for commissioners if they're not allowed to speak to folks in the executive branch. I mean, the separation of powers is clearly defined for what you're able to do, but just that communication is really wrought with problems, I think.
I agree. Ms. Perdue, I agree. You're way more effective if you can sit down with somebody and discuss what's going on. And if you're told you can't, I've heard the comments that, we need a two-people system because it's too busy for one. Well, if the commissioners have to bypass talking to a department head and just call the chief executive, that's just putting more on the table. I totally disagree with the two-person system. I don't think we should be paying somebody to shake hands, kiss babies, and cut ribbons. We've had a single person running our government for close to 50 years. It's worked in the past. Why would we spend that kind of money? And like Mr. Anderson said, is it going to fix it? Who's to say? Accountability is the only thing that I see that will fix it. Even if you vote a few people in that aren't working, the majority are, and then you turn around and try to fine-tune and fix the things that don't work. But to turn around and completely change your whole government and start over, I'm sure Dan Clark came and spoke to you guys about the changing of government. It's a process. Cindy, I think you were on the commission when he told us, when the group of people had a petition and they couldn't get it done in time, so they wanted the council to vote on it. And he went through the process, and I think it's like a 4 to 6 year process to completely change your government over. So it's a long process. It isn't something that 90 days, I heard 90 days, they change over. It's not done like that. At least it wasn't when he told us that probably 4 or 5 years ago. Maybe things have changed. Maybe there's been different things. But to go through this here, right here, is a 2-year process. And then the people vote on it. And like you said, you got people that just got elected or people that are in for 2 years. Do you just kick them out? I don't think you can. I think you got to go through the process, and and that's kind of the way he explained it to us. And then you just phase them out. And you could ask him. He could certainly tell you how it would work. But when he explained to us that it's a pretty lengthy process to change your whole government, and I think the public needs to know that. If they vote for that, it ain't going to be the day after the election we just open the door, kick everybody out, and bring new people in. There's a lot more to it than that.
Follow-ups. Ms. McCormick?
Thank you, Chair Brindle. Mr. Callahan, when I think about the city-county manager form of government, it's that the council would be the one responsible for hiring that individual, and they would be the one managing that individual, essentially. It seems to me where that city-county manager would still be like the one responsible for hiring staff, department heads, and other staff, and they would certainly be responsible for managing that staff. But it does, I look through here and I can't see where there's anything that says that the city-county commissioners can't talk to staff. That just doesn't seem like it's in our form of government now. And if we did have a city manager system, it seems like it would be even less likely to occur, because the commissioners would be the one managing that staff, the city county manager. And if they weren't allowing them to, I don't think they could say, you can't talk to the staff.
Well, and we never ever pushed the issue and asked the legal side of it or whatever. We just went with the rules, and some people still call certain department heads and they'll answer, and but they were told too that it has to go through the chief executive. But I agree with you. If that's the case, that's a good point, that, to me, that's possibly a way to fix accountability. We have to be able to see that if we make ordinances and resolutions that somebody's following through and doing them. It doesn't make any sense to come up here every Wednesday and do that stuff and nobody follows it. And there's a lot of that going on. You know, some of these department heads do it their own way. In fact, tonight we were here till midnight. One of the department heads was here. He went up there, got a drink of water, and I asked him. He was sitting right behind me. I says, "What's going on?" And Cindy ain't here tonight, unfortunate, but it's her district. Cindy might remember. The gate up on the Big M's locked. Well, there never used to be a gate there. And so the Park and Recs department was having problems with people up there partying and stuff. So they said they put a dumpster up there for the trash, and they pushed the dumpster over the hill. And so they said, we'll put a gate up. We said, that's fine. You don't have to lock it off. A lot of people go up there. It's a great view of the community. And so I've been watching. And so we passed a resolution so they could put the gate up. And it was like our city parks. The gate had to be opened in the morning, and then they could close it at dawn. Well, I asked him, I says, I've been up there a dozen times at least, and the gate has never been open. He says, no, and it's not going to be opened. Just like that. I said, you're kidding me. He says, yeah, I made the decision, it's not being open. We did a resolution. He says, show it to me. Well, that ain't our job to show it to him. He's getting paid the big money to be the director of the parks. He's supposed to know that. He was on the council when we did this. So those are the kind of things that are very frustrating, you know. So what's our recourse? What do we do? Obviously, somebody gave him the authority to go ahead and do that, but our resolution doesn't say he had that authority. I see just the other day I went up there, the county went up and graded it for the people to get up to do the fireworks. Yeah, I mean, it's one of the best views of Butte when they've got the gate locked, which is okay. There's a way you can walk up there, but there's a lot of people that are elder, and I've had people come to town, they wanted to go up there and look. We used to go up there all the time on our bikes and stuff when we were kids. I mean, that was very heavily used. And he made the decision it's not going to be open no more. And that's where our problem is. Where's our authority to fix that?
So for our YouTube listeners and for ourselves too, I apologize, we were having a little sidebar because we were looking at the charter in regards to, section 3.04, restrictions on the Council of Commissioners. And so it says, except for the purpose of inquiry or investigation under this charter or the administrative code, the Council of Commissioners or its members shall deal with local government employees who are subject to the direction and supervision of any elected or appointed officer solely through the appropriate elected or appointed officer. And neither the Council of Commissioners nor its members may give orders to any such employee, either publicly or privately. So I think the nuance is language, because you're talking about asking questions, which would be purpose of inquiry or investigation, like you're trying to find things out.
Right.
But this is specifically saying that the Council of Commissioners is not given authority to enforce or give orders to employees of the executive branch. And just to clarify, the language there that we're wrestling with and we're looking at. And I think Ms. McCormick was referring to, if we change forms, if we go to city manager type, then you would be vested with some authority to supervise the city county manager, which might change some of this language. So just, in our thought process and our deliberations, so we can kind of put that in our hat to think about.
Great.
So I think that does bring us to question 5. Yes? Yes. Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So number 5, Dan, Many Butte-Silver Bow department directors and elected officials have suggested that government efficiency might be better served by an executive branch comprised of a hired city-county manager and an elected mayor. What are your thoughts as to a city-county manager-mayor compared to the current chief executive form?
You know, obviously, these people are frustrated that they want change. You know, they work here day to day. Us as commissioners, you know, we're just here part-time. We show up on Wednesday nights or whatever nights we have other things going on. They certainly would know reasons way more than the council would know. Like I said, to add another person, if we could change the language where there is some authority for some accountability, I'd certainly be in favor of that. To add a second person, just to take some of the work off of the first person so they can go out and cut ribbons and stuff, that's a lot of money to spend. Are things gonna be better? You know, we can hire 2 people and still have the same. We don't know. That's just a matter of, like I said, it's a matter of who ends up with the job. Certain people really put a lot of effort in and work their tails off, and other ones coast. And that's the luck of the draw. Sometimes we don't always get the best people when the elections come, you know. So you can change the title, you can change the position, but like Mr. Anderson said, is that going to fix everything? You know, I definitely would like to see there's some authority for accountability. I mean, that's where we take the most heat, is things that we voted on to do that aren't getting done. And we get beat up on a regular basis over. You remember back when, you know, and it's gotten worse. You know, our parking's worse than it's ever been. We had a committee to fix that, and that went away. And so we've got commissioners that have said, fine, let's get rid of the whole parking. Let's save the taxpayers money. But I don't believe that's the answer, you know. Just because we don't want to enforce our ordinances doesn't mean you get rid of them, you know. Figure out why they're not being enforced and let's fix it. I get phone calls from bus drivers. They're scared to death to drive some of these streets. They can't see around the campers, and it doesn't change. You know, that $200,000 that they were in debt, you could probably make that money up in 2 months just in camp trailers and trailers on the streets. It would be covered. You know, when it first happened, they said, well, you know, we don't have any vehicles. I said, they're selling cop cars for $100. We can give you a dozen of them. So that excuse kind of went away. So they ended up with a couple more cop cars. And I know they've had some turnover in people. But even one person, here's a perfect example. Mr. Steffen can tell you. We got a guy up there. In 2 weeks, he wrapped $10,000 worth of tickets at Montana Tech in the first 2 weeks of school. It can be done if they want to do their job. You know, we got to quit making excuses and just do it. You know, you make 100. I don't know what a trailer ticket is now. It should be 150, 200. You make up a lot of money in a big hurry on trailers. You know, they'd have trailers that sit there all winter long. You could tell there was no snow under them. Well, we can't. We got to go and warn them first because we got to make sure they've been there for 48 hours. There's no snow under it. We've had snow for 6 months. You know, I mean, just the excuses were that bad. It's so frustrating.
Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So on that point, I wanted, and we didn't ask the other commissioners this question, but I'm just going to ask you since you're the last one. I just want your opinion on one of the other things we're looking at with regard to the structure of Butte-Silver Bow government is looking at the flow chart and where things rest or come to land. One example has been the coroner's office. And the coroner's office maybe move it underneath the sheriff's sheriff's office, because you have deputies that are on 24/7. That could be deputy county coroners, and then other places where, you know, one department might have a slew of people under them and subgroups under them. What is your thought on doing some of that movement within the flow chart of Butte-Silver Bow's government departments?
You know, I'm in favor if you get the right person running the department. We had a department that kept taking more, and they couldn't handle what they had. So that just made the problem worse. But every time they took more, that means their salary went up higher. They weren't thinking about doing more. They were thinking about whether it was at the end of the month on the payday. And that's the department where we have all our problems. I mean, parking wasn't in community enrichment. The weed department wasn't in community enrichment. I mean, you go to some of our buildings, I mean, I don't know how many times, thank God they got a pretty good guy down there at the Belmont Center that takes care of their lawns and stuff, but the knapweed down there is horrific. We got a weed department. We don't even spray weeds in our own properties. That's got to be fixed. Those are problems that just keep going on and on. We got people that are in that weed department. How do we have weeds on our own government properties? Knapweed. I mean, it's a noxious weed. We shouldn't have that. The guy cuts it down with the mower. They never go up there and spray. You know, I see them out on the highway. I see them out on the freeway spraying. And that's great. The highway department pays them. But is that where they're at? So the highway department will pay them, and are they neglecting the community? I mean, we gotta have answers to that stuff. You know, I used to see them all the time. You see them driving early in the morning down the street spraying the curbs and stuff. I haven't seen a weed truck, and obviously I'm not out as often as I used to be on the streets, but I'm out early in the morning. I go to work at 5 in the morning many days, you know. Yeah.
Mr. Steppen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dan, just kind of taking that a step further, you talked about the community enrichment issues and enforcement problems. And one thing that we've heard pretty consistently from a lot of these department heads is the challenges that they have around their resources, both human and financial. As the body that approves the budget, there are places where you've seen inside of a current budget that can be reallocated to help address some of these things. We hear about reaching our cap, and that costs are going up a lot faster than the budgets, and we feel that certainly,
Yes.
as a state entity. So, where do you see inside of the current budget maybe are some of the solutions to the human and financial resource issue?
You know, we as councilmen don't get a lot of time to spend on the budget. And I was on the Budget and Finance Committee for my first 4 years. And I got off it after that just because it was the first committee of the day, and to get off of one job, run home, shower, and get back in that short a time was really tough. And so I got off of that committee. So I'm certainly not as involved as I used to be, but I don't think there's a department out there that can't use some a little adjustment here and there. Everybody, we all can be more efficient. Everybody can, and I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, I mean, these departments are squeezed tight. I mean, they're worked, these departments are really worked hard, but they're sharing things, you know. The weed department, them and the community enrichment work together. I mean, we don't spray weeds in the winter. We still keep those employees. Our Park and Recs department, we don't have parks to take care of in the winter, but they do snow. You know, they shovel a lot of our properties, and then they plow the trails. So they do work. You know, we do have people working, and that's a good thing. You know, we don't need people year-round if we're not going to use them. So there's ways to utilize them. I know back when I first got on the council, each department, you know, they tried to consolidate equipment. And we do that a little bit, but equipment is so vital to people's jobs. and we have a small window when we can do construction. They can't be sharing excavators and skid steers when these guys have a project and these guys are in the middle of a project and they want to borrow it. So they're tying that project up because these guys can't give their equipment up. So back then we decided each group got their equipment that they needed, and we tried to do that. Now they still do share equipment. You know, Metro Sewer might not be using an excavator for something, and the water company or the road department will borrow it, but only when they're not using it. You know, obviously the water department, they went and caved in that whole water line out there from Wise River all the way to the highway, all the way to Silver Bowl, because they put in a new line. Well, it's places where once there was no water in the old wooden line, there was spots that was caving in because there was no water in it. Well, the guys' cows were falling in the hole. So the water company had excavators out there caving it in for a couple of years. Well, now they don't need those excavators as much, and so, you know, they can share equipment that way. And they do share equipment, but our construction time is so short of a window that each department pretty much has to have some of their own equipment, you know.
Other questions? Any follow-ups? Mr. Dennehy, is there anything that you would like to add? And then he gives me that look. He was thinking, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm sure I've seen that before.
I was taking this as a question. You just turned me bright red. Mr. Callahan, anything else from your perspective?
All I can do is say thank you, folks, for what you do. I'm pretty impressed on how many hours you guys are putting in. I had no idea you guys would be here every Monday for hours, and this is going to go on for 2 years. And I mean, the dedication, and we certainly, when it came to an election, we certainly didn't go wrong on the election of you folks. You guys, we really got a good crew here, and we appreciate everything you guys do.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you. I appreciate that map, too. It's a good visual.
It's telling, you know, to look at that. Most of our councilmen don't even know the look of the map. You know, even this purple up here, that isn't District 11, that's District 12. And like I said, how can we not even have the accurate map in our council chambers, you know? So those things are things that, you know, we're lagging behind on. We gotta work on things, and so, and like I said, I believe if you can see it, I could talk till I'm blue in the face up here. Unless you actually see it, it's not as effective. So that's why I've been trying for 8 months to get one of these.
Ms. Khan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Did Tony Roth make that for you?
Yes, he did.
All right, I'll call him tomorrow and get a copy of it.
Great guy.
Yeah. He's
yeah,
very.
and he put it on a key drive or whatever the hell they call those things.
A little fob.
So he can just print another one right off.
Or do you have it on a thumb drive?
No, he has it.
He just has it? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Commissioner Callahan.
Thank you, folks.
Okay, good thing we had pizza. We appreciate you. Okay, so item 8, correspondence and our study commission update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No correspondence. I have 2 updates. One is the hearing assistance program has been ordered. Apparently, when they upgraded the whole new system, they, for some reason, didn't do that. Kathy had been kind of working on it, but I contacted our ADA person, and he urged me to file a grievance, so I filed a grievance on the behalf of Mr. Bandra. And so the hearing assistance system has been ordered, so hopefully it will be here very soon. And they haven't had it. They've been testing alternatives, all of which have failed to this point. So hopefully we'll have something by our next meeting, maybe.
Okay. Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you for your work on that.
And I have one more.
Okay.
I sent an email out about some transcription software that I hope you all got. What I'd like for you to do is kind of look at the June 16 minutes that I submitted, and then look at the June 16 minutes that's in that zip file, and see if those would be sufficient, if those are sufficient for this group's needs, or if you'd like me to continue doing what I'm doing here, one way or the other, just to let me know if we want to go forward with that kind of a service using that software.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we can all at least give you our opinion on it, what it looks like. And I have some experience with transcription software from my work, and you do still have to edit some things because of homonyms, names, punctuation, those sort of things. So just know that it's not perfect.
Yeah. Well, and I looked, there's several files there. There's one that's like the minutes, and it was like, I only read like a little bit because I was in between stuff. And I looked at the transcription first and went, well, this is exactly what I'm doing. But then realized there were minutes, and then there was like a to-do list that it generates. So there's a couple different things in there that it could do for us if we needed it to. But just, yeah, look at it, send me your opinion. We can discuss it here in the open, or you can just email me your opinion, let me know. Just say, Kim, this is trash, don't use that, whatever. Or tell me you love it.
Thank you. All right, moving on to unfinished business, we have our op-ed pieces.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did send to everybody 2 potential op-eds that we could be used in the next running. And I hope there wasn't confusion. Those weren't intended to be one and then the next, but rather 2 similar themes with just 2 versions to get. And so if they looked like they were very similar, it's because they are. I did get some feedback from Mary today that she likes piece number 1, and I think I agree. Number 2 kind of reintroduces the topic, and I'm not sure that that's necessary. But what I had as the developing themes from our work certainly include our executive branch form of government and the number of commissioners. And so I highlighted those, but really the intent is to let them know the progress and how the public can get involved at the next, and how critical that is going forward as we complete what I guess I'm calling the internal review. And now it's time for the external feedback. And so that's the intent around how I framed those op-eds.
Now you really do have a thought.
Yeah, now I have my pin up, Matt, not my. I like both of them. I like number 1 better, but I think it hits more, and I think you did a wonderful job, and I think it kind of sets the table for the exterior development of what we're listening to. So thank you again for your time and effort.
If I can just, I'm sorry, Mary, go ahead.
I was just going to say I like number 1 best because I think it, it doesn't repeat what you've said before. It's a better bridge between the previous op-eds. But, I mean, they're both excellent, and we could use either one. I just thought I like number 1 better, just a little bit.
So if we're all comfortable with version 1, the last question I would have is, I have some specific dates, survey release dates, listening session dates. Those were based on the calendar that Shanna had provided. And I guess I would just ask the group if, before we release, if we're comfortable and ready to place those dates as stated in that calendar, if that makes sense. So if we say we're releasing a survey on July 16th, how comfortable are we that we're releasing a survey July 16th?
Matt, I would say that, I don't know, I just feel in my gut we're a little bit premature on the dates, just because I don't want us to get painted into a corner, especially when we're still waiting for that okay from the Council of Commissioners with the contract and getting her all set up and ready to run. And I always use, now I'm using Chad's, setting up for success. We want to do that, and I love that term because, I love the first version, A versus B, but then not tied us to quite yet those markers, only because I don't want us to get in a bind because of it.
Yeah, we are, our council should approve that contract on Wednesday night. And then Shanna is ready to hit the ground running, but maybe connect with her in terms of survey specifically. And then our listening sessions, this body had agreed last week to visiting with her on the 17th in detail in terms of what our public outreach plan and what we were ready to commit to and how our work was going to go forward. Because we discussed maybe we wouldn't need to meet every Monday night. Rather, our work would be happening in the community more, and we'd be face to face with our public. And so we might be changing our work calendar as far as Monday night meetings go. So I know that puts you a little bit behind in terms of wanting to get it out, but maybe reach out to Shanna, and then perhaps not next Monday, but the Monday following, which would be the 14th. We can get firm dates.
That sounds great. And it would not be difficult to make slight revisions to say, attend our meetings. You can find our meeting schedule here as opposed to, every Monday and those things. So I think I have my direction.
Excellent. Anything else regarding op-ed? Which, nice segue right into public outreach. And so please do come prepared for that meeting on the 14th of July, ready to talk about public outreach with Shanna. That was what we had agreed to last meeting in terms of making sure that we were thinking about our dates and her calendar that she had given us and some of the ideas that she had for our outreach. And it looks like we're already doing it anyway. We're on Party Line. We did, you did the podcast. We've been to Kiwanis. So appreciate all the efforts that people have been making. So, and just more to come, I think. Which brings us to Party Line, and our next Party Line should be July 30th, or July 23rd. Was it, Kim? I forget. Are we the third Wednesday of the month? So it would be July 23rd. So we talked about mixing up the order. So who would like to do July 23rd? Mr. Steppen, did you want to do July? You're giving yourself a, yeah, maybe.
I'm looking now, but I can do the 23rd, and summer might be a little bit easier for me than when we get into fall.
Excellent. Mr. Dennehy? Okay, so we'll put at least the two of you. I might join you. I might join you. I haven't been there yet. We'll see what the... Yeah, so maybe we'll at least put the two of you down and we'll go from there. And then I'll start to we'll fill out the rest of the calendar. And I think, again, what we talk about on the 14th might help us in terms of the topic for Party Line, because we'll really want to push any listening sessions we might have. So we might have to change dates just so that we can get on and push people to those sessions. Any other discussion on Party Line? Okay, so moving on to new business. The judges came by before meeting a few weeks ago and visited with Kim and I regarding their advice that they had gotten regarding their judicial canons. And it's not okay for them to come and appear before us because they don't want to give the impression that they're giving a legal opinion regarding the charter, or that they have more weight than any other citizen. However, they did want us to know what they do, so they were providing everything written, and you've received some of those, or you should have received some of those via email. And then Judge Kilmer came tonight with the Justice Courts, so I put that at desks. And so we, feel free to redo. They said to reach out with them to any questions that you might have regarding the materials. We can add them into our notes for the public to look at as well. And then Judge Kilmer had given us a look at their budget for Justice Court, and he Said combined, runs around $249,000 a year is the amount of revenue that they bring in. It ranges from 240 to 250. So this current exact dollar is 249, 114 and 44 cents. So he provided that as well. Ms. Khan?
Is that what he emailed us, or is that something separate?
He emailed and he provided it in
Okay, so I have
paper.
that in my email then. Okay, because I didn't get a physical copy.
Oh, I have your copy probably. Any other new business? All right, we do not have a public hearing, and I really hope we don't have any other scheduled matters. So next week, we are off. We are not going to meet on July 7th, so our next meeting will be July 14th. And I hope you all have an excellent holiday. And we do have a celebration to say congratulations to Mr. Steppen for being recognized as Athletic Director of the Year. Is that the right award? Yes, very good. And congratulations. Oh, yeah. Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. With regard to the deadline for charter questions to the county attorney, can you tell me what that is again? I think I forgot.
That's also the 14th, is it not? Or was it that Wednesday? Gosh, I'm remembering too. I'm having a hard time remembering. I remember it being 14th of July. And that was just to give him the questions. We would schedule his meeting, following that so that he has time to look through and get his legal opinion ready. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Thanks all. See you in 2 weeks.